When did you get busted in the act? You know, aside from being caught doing the deed in the back of my car by a police officer, I don't really have one that's truly horrifying, but I know the rest of the internet does, so let's hear it. When I was 6, I had to go to the bathroom pretty bad, and my father used to tinkle in the backyard all the time, so I ran out into the back as quickly as possible, and for some reason, don't ask why, I completely removed my clothing and proceeded to go wee-wees on our oak tree. And out of nowhere, I also went number 2 on myself while standing up. My parents and 3 of their friends, who had been enjoying their drinks, saw the whole thing. The problem for me wasn't that I got busted, it's that I got busted by the wrong person. In freshman year in college, I was in the dorms and I had a pretty goofy relationship with my roommate at the time. I heard his key enter the door, so I decided to do something funny. So I stood up in the center of our room and shoved my hand into my pants and began to furiously mime tickling my pickle. I closed my eyes, headbanged, and waved my other hand wildly in the air. I heard the door swing open and I just went for it, shaking my head and both my arms in an exaggerated fashion. When I opened my eyes to see his expression, I realized I was staring into the eyes of my roommate's father, whom I hadn't met yet. He was helping my roommate carry some groceries in from the car. He set down the groceries as quickly as he could and then just left. There was another trip, but he just left those at the door and didn't come inside. He'd flushed red instantly. In short, my freshman college roommate's dad walked in on my imitation of whacking the mule wildly in the center of the room. It was the first time we'd met. At the Mall of America, walking around the upper balcony when the floor started shaking a bit, I muttered out loud, "Holy crap, was that an earthquake?" I turned around and there was a morbidly obese woman walking right past me. Oh my god, I hope she didn't hear me. It still might have been an earthquake and a coincidence. Still, I can't imagine that either of you are feeling great for the next few hours of your lives. I too have done this kind of crap and you have my utmost sympathy. Post-whoopee with an undressed boyfriend laying in my dorm bed, I heard a knock at the door. For whatever reason, I assume it's my roommate, who was pretty chill about stuff like that, so I wrap myself in a towel and stand behind my dresser, about to head into the bathroom, and say, "Come in." It was both of my RAs coming in to do room inspection. It wasn't my proudest moment. I can't imagine what they thought about me and why I thought it was okay to say, "Come in," right then. I was at the Metrodome for a Twins game. I developed a severe case of itchy butt, and it soon became clear that a booster wipe was imperative. Left the game and stood in the long line for the stalls. When it was finally my turn, the large handicapped stall with the double-wide door was the one available. When I got in, I had some difficulty with the broken locking mechanism, but soon I got it to seemingly latch. I then went to town on my itchy butt. Facing the toilet so it would seem like I was taking a leak, I wiped once and again and a third time until it came back white. I threw the final tissue in the toilet, pulled up my pants, zipped and flushed, finally turning around to leave the stall, only to see 20 or more very uncomfortable-looking men doing their best to avoid any eye contact with me. The stall door had silently swung open behind me, and my shame was laid bare for all the world to see. I wanted to make a beeline from the bathroom, but in light of what I'd just been doing, and the fact that everyone knew it, that just wasn't an option. So, head down, I darted to the sink, washed my hands, and got the heck out of there as quickly as possible. I've never been so simultaneously embarrassed and amused at the same time. Despite my mortification, it was just too funny for me not to share. I bring down the house every time I tell this story. Walking home after a closing shift at Wendy's, my bowels suddenly went into watery-feeling red alert mode. Still 3 blocks away from home, 4 blocks away from any public restrooms, I glanced around frantically and spotted a house across the street with tall boxwood bushes surrounding it. Streetlights didn't reach it. Target acquired. I sprinted over, yanked down my pants, and squatted behind the nearest bush. Then with a hearty, "Hi-yo, I blasted my employee meal all over the wall, ground, bush, pants and undies, and shoes. With a heartfelt, "Frick," I gingerly tried to scramble out of my soiled clothing, only to trip helplessly into the crap-soaked bush as my understandably unremoved and equally crap-covered shoes snagged in my pants legs. I laid in the now crushed bush, cursing quietly for a moment as I didn't want to disturb the residents. Then I managed to kick off my shoes and remove the pants and undies without getting much further soiled. The undies were ruined, but the pants, with a little work, could pass for okay in the dark until I got home. Crouching behind that bush, bitterly enjoying the cool breeze on my butt and junk, I scrubbed the soiled parts of the pants and the grass, used my t-shirt to clean myself. I always took off the employee shirt after work, thank God. I did all of this as best as I could, shoved the undies and t-shirt as far into the bush as I could hide them, then stood up to inspect myself, ready to make a quick dash for home. The sound of 3 startled screeches rang out into the neighborhood as I suddenly popped up facing the house, directly in front of what I guess was the bedroom window, where both the husband and wife, in bedclothes, were staring in disbelief not 6 inches from my nose. I convulsively jerked back, again falling into the fricking bush, sliding off it to the other side on my back, scratching the living heck out of myself. Boxwoods are tough, by the way. I flopped like a fish in agony for a few moments, or what seemed like an eternity, then finally managed to stagger back to my feet and bound groggily away. Shoes forgotten, one arm clawing at my back, trying to feel if I'd actually impaled myself on that bush or not. It wasn't my proudest moment. In short, forced to take a horrific number 2 under a bedroom window, thoroughly humiliated by a bush, observed for an unknown amount of time by the occupants of said house. When I first started working in New York City, I lived on Long Island and had a nearly 2-hour door-to-door commute via the Long Island Railroad. One night on a later train, I managed to grab a great seat only to have them pull the train out of service and ask that we switch to a new train. For those that don't know, this is bullcrap because now all the people that were late and forced to stand have the advantage of exiting first and getting to the new train for a seat. I got off and I knew that I had no shot at a seat as I was behind hundreds of people going up the escalator. I noticed that the down escalator was totally empty and decided to just go for it. Ran my butt off to get to the top, took my final leap and came up short. I hit the deck flat on my face. Humiliated, I got back up and ran to the train. I got myself a seat too. In short, don't go up the down escalator unless you're willing to pay the price. This is a wonderful depiction of how most of us would do in any given action movie. So thank you once again, people of the internet, for reminding us that we're not Jason Bourne. We're Terry, the overweight office accountant, and if we try to climb down via that scaffolding, we will in fact shatter our pelvis. Sophomore year of college, I was on the rowing team. The weather wasn't yet warm enough to be on the water, so we were inside on the ergs, which is what we call the rowing machines. We had some hard workout. I can't quite remember what, but it was an interval workout with 3 minutes on and 2 minutes off for 25 minutes or something along those lines. The point is that it was intense. More intense than normal. The intenseness of the workout was making me have to break wind, but the constant use of my leg, butt, and abdominal muscles prevented me from letting them out. So after 25 minutes, we had a 5-minute break before the next 25-minute piece, and I go over to the water fountain to drink. I had my music blasting and I was exhausted, so I didn't really notice my surroundings at all. I just took a quick glance around before bending down to drink. While I was drinking, all of the gas that had built up came to a head and was about ready to burst. Still bent over and drinking, I let it rip. I swear it was the loudest, largest volume emission I've ever expelled in my entire life, and I still have yet to top it. The force of my butt cheeks vibrating was violent enough to the point that it made my butt sore afterwards. It was a full second. Seriously, say 1001, and that's how long it went, of absolute maximum flatulent thrust. It felt like I'd expelled my entire lung capacity out of my rear end. Feeling rather pleased with myself, I stood up and turned to go back to the ergs. To my horror, standing directly behind me, seriously not more than a foot from my butt, was a girl waiting to drink. She didn't look up, she didn't move in any way, her facial expression was completely frozen with her mouth wide open, eyes staring at where my butt had been. I quickly shuffled away and looked behind me after walking about 50 feet, and she still hadn't moved. I spent the rest of the next week bursting into random fits of giggles. It became a bit of a team joke. To this day, I'll sometimes think about it and burst out laughing. I also giggle at the fact that she may have seen who I was before standing behind me, and every time she sees me on campus, all she can think about is that one scarring moment of her life. In short, ripped an enormous guff when I was drinking at the water fountain, not knowing anyone was behind me. The girl froze in a look of terror. Maybe she's still standing there paralyzed to this day. I went to college about 4 hours from home. I was coming home from spring break one year. The parents lived in a rural area, and about the last 45 minutes of the trip, there was no place to stop and take a bio break. I didn't have to go at the last opportunity, so I drove right on by. I was about 20 minutes from home, and I felt the turd drop into the chamber. This wasn't a "ruh-roh, Raggy" moment right away. I felt I could hold it together. It would only be about 20 more minutes. All was well, and as I approached home, I think the psychological fact of, yes, I made it, set in, and the last mile of my trip was sheer panic. But alas, this is not a tale of me crapping my pants. This is a tale of not expecting anyone to be home. I made it to the front door, and as I was clinching the Bombay doors tightly, I started singing a little tune to take my mind off the torpedo that was armed and ready to launch. Gonna crap my pants, gonna crap my pants, gonna crap in my pants. Over and over again. Walked into the kitchen and saw one of my mum's best friends who was there for a visit, unbeknownst to me. Mum was at work. Horrified, I immediately changed my tune and played it off like I was just lazily singing random tunes. Shush, 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 do-dum-dum-do-do. So I poker-faced it and went right for the John. But I think she probably figured it out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In second grade, I was asked to deliver something to the main office. I was so excited that I got chosen that I forgot the door to the classroom was right at the end of the hall I was about to go down. The whole class watched me skip all the way down the hall. The sound of laughter was echoing down the hall, and the crippling embarrassment still haunts me nearly 20 years later. Listening to music in my car, awesome song comes on. For a second, I think I'm a rock star and bob my head up and down with that "I'm so hardcore" face. I do that all the time, I can't help it. I'm at a light and I look over, and my ex is next to me with his new girlfriend. They both start laughing and waving, and while they were still watching, I accidentally spit my own gum down my shirt. I cannot look him in the face when I run into him. I live in a small town and I see him all the time. I was about 13 and watching a Marilyn Monroe movie. She was doing this hot striptease, so I thought, why not? And started whacking the old hog. Now, I thought I was alone in an upstairs bedroom, so I finished and then noticed there was a guy in the window smiling at me. I forgot they were painting the house. Later, my sister said to me, "So, you really like Marilyn Monroe, huh?" Oh God! I think it's pretty crazy that this guy, A, stayed watching a minor do his stuff until the end of the deed, and that B, he immediately decided he should share the fact that he was staring at self-fulfilling members of the household. Not sure that anything he'd have to say would hold up in court. My lord, I'd managed to forget this for 19 years, and now here we are. I was about 6, and my family had just gotten a cat. He licked himself all over, all the time, because that's just what cats do. Not understanding the purpose, I figured there had to be something awesome about licking a cat. So I was just sitting there, looking at the cat, who was just licking the frick away as usual. My sister was across the room but otherwise occupied. Curiosity getting the better of me, I lean over and lick my cat. For the record, he tasted like a cat. So as I sat contemplating the cattiness, I hear from across the room, "Did you just lick the cat?" Yes. Sister was disappointed. I used to sketch customers at work when they were taking forever to order and just staring at the menu. Often I'd accentuate undesirable features because I freaking hate most of our customers. I stopped doing this when a lady came up to the counter and leaned over it asking, "What are you drawing?" It got awkward. No one noticed before her though. I used to work at Starbucks. We had this massive pair of tongs used for pulling paninis out of the oven. One closing shift, I had the brilliant idea of mimicking Pac-Man. I then proceeded to clap said tongs in front of my face while chanting "Waka Waka Waka" and walking out onto what I thought was a completely empty sales floor. I was greeted by all the members of my new boyfriend's family. I froze, and they were staring blankly at me. Awesome first impression. Oh God, here it goes. Two-part story. Starts with a whole day trip with my dad and a couple of his friends. After eating a couple of burgers my dad made, I got a massive case of the runs. I went into the woods to hide in a couple of trees. No biggie, I thought, after evacuating an ungodly amount of number 2. Later that day on the ride home, it happened again. Holy butt juice. My insides were churning, I'm trying to concentrate, it's 15 minutes more home. We finally make it, and as I take that final leap out of the car, I accidentally brown myself in front of all of my dad's friends. They, being the outstanding gentlemen they were, decided to go and get a couple of beers while I sort my crap-covered self out. So here I am, taking a shower to clean myself after the horrible incident, and I start to sing in the shower. I'm singing the Rocky theme at full power, tarun-tun, tarun-tun. Finish my shower and say, frick it, no one's home. So I walk out undressed while doing the Rocky theme and air punching like there's no tomorrow. Walk across the living room where I feel a presence. It's my dad and all his friends staring at me, what the frick faces all around. Not my proudest moment. In short, I crapped myself then got caught air punching to the Rocky theme undressed. When I was an imaginative 13-year-old, I was always coming up with inventive ways to prepare for kissing a girl. I tried kissing magazine pictures, which didn't taste nice, and the mirror, which tasted even worse. Also a balloon. Seriously, don't bother. But I still felt woefully unprepared. One day, I was at a department store and I saw a shapely half mannequin that was sequestered away from the general public. I thought I'd give it a shot. Had to be better than a balloon, right? Not so much. I guess mannequins aren't cleaned regularly, because when I pecked it on the lips, the funky smell and oily film hit me like a brick. That brought me to my senses and I turned to leave. I had to find a water source to clean whatever filth I'd just touched my mouth to. That's when I heard the bzzzt bzzzt sound of servo motors and I looked up at the security camera zooming in on me. My grandmother used to run estate sales for people who didn't know what to price things at, or for people who were still grieving and couldn't be bothered. I always came to help her out at estate sales because it was fun to just hang around with random people's old stuff. So one time when I was about 17, I'd kind of had some green herb, and I was hanging out in some dead dude's house when I found a milk pump for new mothers. I'm a guy, by the way. And I thought, what the heck? And I started to pump my chest for man milk. Not 10 seconds later, shirt over the back of my neck and hooked up to this pump, my grandmother walks in, manages to maintain the very blank expression on her face, does a 180-degree turn, walks out and closes the door after her. Not unlike Grandpa Simpson in the Burlesque House episode. And not a word of it was ever spoken again. In college, I lived with 2 roommates in second year. One weekend, they both went away back to their hometowns, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have my then-girlfriend over for some fun bedroom times without volume restraint. Saturday morning, we got at it again right after getting up, and after I excused myself, walking completely undressed to go get us some water. I walked out of my room and to the end of the bedroom hallway, and when I opened the door, one of my roommates was just standing there, about to light a cigarette. Inside, which was strictly verboten amongst us. We both just froze. We were staring at each other, me completely undressed and him with a cigarette hanging from his mouth, a lit match burning in his hand right next to the cigarette. I wheeled around after what seemed like forever and walked back into the bedroom where I fell over laughing. As someone who's been caught in this position and worse by flatmates, it seems like one of those things just neither of you ever mention again. And for whatever he could complain about, at least you weren't the one breaking the rules like he was. More something said, I was walking down the hallway at my school, I proceeded to walk up the stairs with my arms full of books. For some reason, I thought my body could handle the simple task of stairs, considering I'd been on them my entire life. I was wrong, of course, and my left foot caught on the staircase. I collapsed to the ground, face planting into a stair. My books exploded and scattered everywhere. I just looked up and screamed, "Con!" Then I saw an elderly professor staring down at me. He made a remark about noise in the hallway and smirked. The wrinkly old jerk didn't even help me. I was in the park a few weeks ago and I noticed a mini tornado/whirlwind nearby that was about 10 feet wide, whipping garbage and leaves around in a perfect circle. As it moved closer, I held my ground, and soon I was in the exact eye of the storm, with flying debris circling around me. Accordingly, I clenched my fists and raised them to around chest level, then looked to the sky with eyes squinting through the dust and wind, and let out a mighty extended "Roar!" to fully emphasize my powerful wizarding weather summoning skills. It was exhilarating. At least 5 people probably saw me, but I was unconcerned as they were mere mortals. I walked away like a boss as if it was nothing more than a morning stretch. A few years ago, I was walking through Walmart with my dad. We were just going to get something real quick. I was wearing a low-cut shirt, which is relevant. My dad and I were talking about funny walks people do, and I started in on this long stride, fast-paced walk. Well, my chest popped out of my shirt. I got them back inside real quick and looked around. At first, I didn't see anyone notice and then looked ahead and there was this guy walking towards us. I'm absolutely sure he saw, although he sported a pretty good poker face. When I was a teenager and my parents were away for the weekend, I decided that it would of course be the opportunity for an extravaganza of beating my meat like the world's worst butcher. I got hold of some adult magazines, set myself up nicely in the living room with the normal accoutrement, and after having a first great whack of things, I was ready for another go. Cue my furious and almost violent tugging, legs akimbo, some really uninhibited crap. And then, looking slightly to the right of the TV, I see movement in the door. After quickly putting myself away and muting the various moans coming from the TV, I sprang to my feet and cautiously made my way to the door, just in time to glimpse the fleeing backs of what appeared to be young children exiting our driveway. I believe they may have been selling chocolates or some other school fundraising effort. Since then, I've been sure to keep my activities within reasonable limits and out of public view. My office has really tinted windows, and one time I opened the blinds and saw a big, fat lady pressed up against the glass, picking food out of her teeth in the window's reflection. It was really gross, and she never saw me. I just closed the blinds again. What's the worst example of rich people problems that you've seen? My rich friend has had to respray his car multiple times because a peacock on his lawn keeps seeing his reflection in it and attacks it like crazy. I was pumping gas in a rather dicey neighborhood at a cheap gas station, and this older woman pulls up in her Bentley. She pulls up on the pump ahead of me and cracks her window slightly and asks for me to help. I ask her what she needs. She asks me to pump her gas because she was too scared to do it herself. I ask her what type of gas she wanted, and she said the cheapest. I asked her if she was sure, with such a high-end car, did she really want to put in budget gas. She said it didn't matter, since she could easily afford any new car she wanted. So I insert my debit card, and she hands me a $100 bill and says keep the change. I fill up her tank and my own 12-gallon Honda Civic tank, and I made about $30 from the change. I finish up at the gas station and jump on the freeway to see my girlfriend at the time, and I'm going the same way as this woman. I get off at the same exit as this woman. She's making a right to an affluent area, and I'm making a left off the exit to a less nice area. She rolls down the window and yells at me, "I thought you were following me." "I'm sorry, where are you heading?" I told her which neighborhood I was going to, and she gave an awkward smile and says, "I'll tell the dispatcher that you're not following me, and that I'm not fearing for my life." The B-word called the cops on me, thinking I was following her to rob her. I ended up getting to my destination, chill with my girlfriend, and I didn't get pulled over. I work at a hotel, and whenever I valet a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, I just think of this old lady. Stuff like this is why if I ever do get to a level of income that could be considered rich, why I won't flaunt it. I wouldn't want to be a paranoid aging dragon of a person clutching my pearls at every turn, while simultaneously trying to show off the same pearls. I knew someone who traded in his Porsche and brought a new one every year. His parents were wealthy and died when he was in his teens, and left him a multi-million-dollar trust fund. What was sad was that he felt like he couldn't pick up women without flashing his cash and expensive sports car, but he would dump them all in a couple of weeks because they were only into me for my money. The loneliest guy I've ever met. And he's not Batman, by the way. His parents died in a car accident and his butler's name is Davin, not Alfred. My wife is a flight attendant. Wife: "What would you like to drink?" Passenger: "I'll have a water." Wait, where is your water from?" My wife: What? What country is your water from? I only drink water from France." Well, I knew the topic would be full of stuff that made me angry, and after this batch, I'm already fuming. Oh well, on to more of these fools with more greenbacks than sense. I went to a fine dining restaurant a few years back that offered us a chance to look at their water menu before dinner. My wife immediately said no because obviously we're not ordering fancy water off the water menu. I'm still kind of disappointed that we didn't at least look at it. That would have been hilarious. Complaining about your allowance from your daddy at age 30, which is the rough equivalent of 2 average salaries. Or complaining that your dad brought you a used car instead of a new one when you were 21, and he only spent $10K. The girl could have been thankful that he even bought her a car. I knew people who brought a new yacht because the wife didn't like the beds on the old one. I knew some who brought a new yacht because the old one had ants and they couldn't find the hive. I mean, this one's a little more understandable. F ants. I would have set the thing on fire. Girl in college lost $6,000 in traveler's checks, but doing the paperwork to have them replaced was too much bother for her. I had friends who had to break their phone. It was the latest iPhone model and perfectly working, but there was a newer one coming out that they wanted, and their parents would only buy it if their other one was broken. I had to endure these kids throwing their phones against walls and being frustrated that their phone wasn't broken yet. My friend wants to marry her boyfriend. They're going to school in America but are both from China, her from Beijing and him from near Shanghai. They both pay $60,000 a year to go to high school here, however she can't marry him because his family only owns 2 houses in Hangzhou, whereas hers owns 7 in Beijing. My rich aunt doesn't let us park in front of her house because it makes her mansion look bad. When I was in high school, my family was pretty poor and I had a fairly rich friend. My single dad spent years saving up for us to go to Disneyland. We finally went when I was 16. Fast forward a year, my friend is going to Disneyland for Halloween break. Her dad told her to invite 2 friends, so she invited me and another girl. I was freaking stoked, but she kept saying, "I don't know, it's probably going to be boring. My grandma takes me to Disneyland like every break." And when we got there, all she wanted to do was sit on benches and text. All of the rides were boring, and she had already been on them dozens of times. It ended up being pretty boring for me because I didn't want to go on the rides without her. A young girl, about 5 years of age, was getting ready to go into New York City to visit her grandmother, New Jersey suburbs. She was at her aunt's house and didn't have a pair of shoes that she liked. She called her chauffeur, told him which pair of shoes she wanted, and the guy got the shoes and drove some 20 miles to deliver them. And she told him he got the wrong ones and he was an idiot. No one in the family thought this was inappropriate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a rich kid becomes a spoiled, entitled brat. Watch The Queen of Versailles. It's riveting and it's all about rich people problems. And it's not about Marie Antoinette, as the title would suggest. It's a documentary about a ridiculously rich family before and during the Great Recession, and the effect that the housing crisis had on them. A person I know only drinks Evian or Voss water because he's allergic to tap water. I'm not ripping on him for not drinking tap, but for only drinking what is regarded as luxury water. He lives in a wealthy neighborhood in America. I just find it crazy that he'll only drink certain kinds of bottled water. My cousin's best friend yelled at her dad and said she hated him because he wouldn't take her to London to buy a dress, even though the exact same dress was available from the exact same store back home. She needed the one from London because they just make things better over there. I know someone who has to buy all the surrounding plots of land to get some privacy. Of all the things on here, this makes the most sense to me. You really can't put a price on privacy. Sure you can. It's the cost of all the land surrounding you. Local billionaire Paul Allen wanted to put a helicopter landing pad on his waterfront compound on Mercer Island several years ago, but the city said no. So Paul Allen had a custom-made helicopter landing pad ship built that motors out 100 yards into the lake beyond the city's jurisdiction whenever Paul wants to take off or land via helicopter. Zoning regulations are for normies, apparently. Well, as petty and obnoxious as that is, I've looked up Mercer Island and at least the result is just one obscenely rich person making other rich people angry. I hope the engineers who designed that custom boat charged him a fortune. A super yacht docked in Italy at high-end marina. Owners wanted the bottled Perrier water for a party they were having in a day or two. They wanted the marina to supply them with a pallet of said water. The marina said it was against policy for them to get a pallet of water to their boat. So these people got a private jet from America to fly in pallet of said water and got it dropped to the boat. The price was about $28,000 as far as I remember, but even that amount seems a bit low for that. I had to help a girl pay her tuition bill and she was upset because she genuinely thought the process of putting in credit card information was too difficult. Yeah, she took her dad's credit card and paid $20,000 for the semester like it was buying a stick of gum. I'd put my tuition on my parents' credit card if I could. $40,000 of purchases would give them a nice pile of points, and I'd obviously transfer them the money to pay it off. Drove a client's wife home from the airport after the big snowstorm in Boston this year. I felt so bad as she told me, "Oh, Roger is so sad. They could only clear the snow from in front of 2 of our garage bays. He wanted to take his BMW out, but he's stuck driving my Mercedes for another week." Oh, well, how does he go on? I went on an amazing trip to the southern US with my girlfriend at the time during the summer, and she had an uncle who was very rich, and she was used to all his wealth. I wasn't. I couldn't believe that we got to do all of these amazing things that we did. Money was just not an object or something you had to worry about. The 3rd day of the trip, I was getting aboard his yacht. He owned the largest one in the club, and it was incredible. Glass stairs, stone walls, and dark, beautiful wood. We all sat down near the back at a table and his wife freaked out. She yelled, "Where are the mats?" Apparently there were supposed to be mats set down on the table before the giant glass bowl of chips and freshly made guacamole could be placed in front of us. She was really mad and almost embarrassed. I've never been so weirded out by someone's anger. I couldn't believe it was such a problem to her. I said to myself, "It's fine. Seriously, I could walk in there and grab them in 4 seconds." I'll never forget, and I learned that extremely rich people don't have the same kind of problems that regular people do. I was once friends with a Chinese girl whose family net worth appeared to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. She told me a story about her rich uncle who owned a super yacht and loved to travel around the world. Apparently his favorite thing to do was pull up into a port and bathe in the stares of everyone admiring his yacht, since it was always the biggest one. Well, one day he goes somewhere, say the Bahamas, and he pulls into the port, and he isn't getting the usual attention since someone else happens to have a bigger yacht than him for once. This girl said it ruined his whole weekend. He was in a terrible mood and couldn't enjoy anything. I was speechless. Also, this girl is the same one that is constantly complaining about how all her friends aren't that smart or nice, and how she doesn't know what to do with all her free time and money. The girl taught me something. Apparently there are a lot of rich people that have so little problems they just make them up. And yeah, I've seen her Facebook pictures, met her friends, seen her cars, and talked to her for long enough to confirm that she probably isn't lying. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a former friend who went into despair because Hurricane Sandy flooded her living room of her childhood home, told everyone she was homeless now and she knew what it felt like to lose everything the way her Jewish ancestors did in World War II. Thing is, she owned another apartment that she lived in on the island. Her parents owned several more vacation homes up and down the coast. They were a little inconvenienced maybe, but far from homeless. I worked for a girl who had a speaker go out in her Ferrari, and she refused to drive any further under these circumstances, so she pulled over to wait for one of her house staff to bring her Porsche. True story. I was invited to a graduation party hosted by a very wealthy couple whose daughter had just graduated from Yale. Her father came out in front of the guests, displaying his Rolex and Cartier watches, asking which one of the 2 expensive watches the group thought would be the more appropriate for the occasion. Everyone just looked at each other silently, not quite sure what to say. Back when the recession hit, one of my very best friend's family was very distraught because they had to sell one of their 3 private jets. I occasionally hung out with a kid whose dad was super rich. He would just ask for money and get it. He tried to use an ATM and had no idea how to, so he asked me or someone else to get the money for him. It was so confusing for him. Most simple tasks were because he was raised to not lift a finger. I knew a guy who had a friend or roommate like that. He recognized the opportunity and had kind of turned himself into an informal personal assistant. He took care of all the details of making things happen for his rich kid friend, while skimming a reasonable living for himself. The way he described it, it didn't sound like he was doing anything unethical. He was just maximizing his friend's enjoyment of spending his allowance, part of the cost of which was paying for his time managing the details of setting up parties, trip planning, researching products, and other things. Honestly, back in the day I'd kind of thought about whether I would enjoy being a butler-type figure for someone rich. I can see the charm in the lifestyle. I enjoy looking after people and cooking and being useful. But then I realized that the kind of client or duties you end up with would really be such a roll of the dice, with some potentially unpleasant results in terms of people and workload. I worked for a non-profit that helped extremely low-income women start their own business. These women would give up food to scrape together enough money to join our program. One of our EDs said she wished she could relate to the clients more, but she's never been poor. She owned 2 homes in one of the most expensive zip codes in the US. Also, another woman, who I really did respect but I didn't always agree with, believed people chose to be in poverty. We would debate for days about that statement. I realized working there that people who run advocacy programs for poverty have no idea what it's really like to be in it. This is a problem because policy and lawmakers are looking at these institutions for advisement on drafting new social safety nets and welfare programs to help the working poor, and they just have no clue. It motivated me to go back and get a master's degree to fight this. I grew up super poor and can speak from experience, not theory. My boss complained to me recently that they owned too much land and too many properties. She's like, "Don't own too much land and properties. It's just a hassle." A kid I know claimed he wasn't rich, saying, "I don't get to pilot my helicopters as much anymore." The guy sitting next to him, when prompted to define an income bracket for middle class, couldn't answer. He eventually arrived at a $700,000 annual income as a rough estimate. I live in the part of my country where internet is really expensive. 16 megabit per second plans are considered plans for extremely rich people. One fine day, one of my friends threw a fit at his dad because he was getting 15 megabits per second instead of 16 for like an hour. I mean, holy crap, I live on a 2 megabit per second connection, which turns into 512 kilobits per second connection after a 30 gigabyte data cap. I just moved to a 50 megabit per second from a 2 megabit per second. Life is not the same anymore. I saw a guy on Instagram who couldn't wait for a car he custom ordered, so he went and bought one from the dealer while he waited for the custom one. My old boss did this. He ordered a brand new BMW M5, and while he was waiting for it to be delivered, he brought a nearly new Maserati Quattroporte. When the BMW arrived, he had no more need for the Maserati, so he sold it, and bought a Bentley Flying Spur with the money. This is the same guy who brought a Ferrari 575 Super America and drives it around like it's an everyday car. I don't know if this is a problem exactly, but I was on the tube in South London and a bunch of young banker types in fancy suits were there with their equally well-dressed arm-candy girlfriends. And one guy was like, "Everyone keeps telling me to get a Bentley, but I'm more of a Lambo man." This was at a point in my life where I was living off $1 boxes of pasta from Tesco, so it was a bit of a surreal moment. Oh man, I work at a place where I interact with a lot of rich people. I've come into contact with lots of rich people problems. Here's a few that I've witnessed. I overheard some ladies saying, "Oh, they can be expensive, but buying nicer cars like Porsches and Mercedes is worth it. We had a GMC once and we only drove it for like 4 years and we had to have something fixed and it just felt old." Also, a mum saying, "I took her to a little friend's birthday party, but I didn't know what to bring. Do kids like Coach bags still? I have no idea." Some other ladies, "So what are you ladies doing this summer?" "Oh, nothing. Last summer was crazy, so this summer we're taking it easy. We're spending 1 week in London and 1 week in Hawaii. But other than that, nothing. We're relaxing this summer." And finally, a 14-year-old kid who looked despondent, and when I asked him what was wrong, he replied, "We're going to Paris again. I hate it. It's so boring." There are many more, but those are a few. My London friend is having a baby, and she's upset that Jimmy Choo doesn't make diaper bags. My mum works at a Baptist church. The pastor makes somewhere between 90 to 100K a year with all of his insurance and gas paid. He is rich as heck, owns 2 homes and has a ton of money on top of his salary. When he takes mission trips and pastor conventions, he holds offerings to pay for his airfare and everything else. Meanwhile, other people that come with him pay their own way. This is a church full of poor and retired people. Well, I'd say that's something you don't hear about all the time, but I'm pretty sure that half the ministers of the megachurches in America are obscenely wealthy and see no fault in wringing out every last cent from their congregation on a regular basis. My buddy had to rent a cabin for his ski trip because his mum just had theirs redecorated for a magazine spread, which hadn't been photographed yet. The same guy couldn't remember which company card he'd put his $4,000 adult nightclub tab on. He really needs an assistant to help keep track of these things. He's interviewed some, but he hasn't hired one yet. Last week was rough. To all those who say they'd want to be his assistant, unless you're a masochist, no, you wouldn't. For every time you'd get to go to that club with the bunch of absolute D-bags he's entertaining, you will have picked his kid up from preschool about 20 times, or double-checked a few reams of paperwork, or stayed on the phone trying to get a hold of some bureaucrat or another, or any of a few other dozen boring tasks that you'll probably have to do 3 at a time. And on top of that, you'd have to deal with King Butthole as your boss. No, not my friend. Inexplicably, he's turned out to be a really good person. No, your real boss would be his dad, who tends to treat everyone that doesn't have at least his net worth worse than garbage, especially his employees. You'd get blamed for every little problem until you're losing your crap and quit, and they'll just pick the next ambitious MBA they could find to take your place. I seriously wouldn't wish that job on my worst enemy. You might think you're tough-minded and could handle it, but you'd be the type that gets broken the hardest. And it would be harder than it should be, because my friend is such a nice guy, and you'd know that if it weren't for you, he'd bear the brunt of it, and those times that are good are really, really good. I'm a nanny for a rich family. A few examples I have. When I get paid, in cash, my boss says, "Oh dear, now I'm going to have to go all the way to the bank to get more cash." Not wanting to go to the bank isn't the annoying rich thing, it was an annoying rich thing because she had $500 still in her wallet, and it was annoying that she was complaining it wasn't enough money to have in her wallet. When they travel, they prefer 2-bedroom suites. One time, they could only get 1 bedroom, and they said, "Well, this just ruins the whole trip." My car got broken into, and I mentioned it felt so awful to drive it knowing someone had been in it. His idea of emphasizing, "Oh, that happened to me. I had to buy a new one." The movie This Is 40. "Honey, we're in debt and both our businesses are operating at a loss." "Okay, let's go spend the night at a nearby luxury hotel and order room service." I was at a marina in the Bahamas to do laundry, stock up on water and supplies with my 25-year-old beta sailboat, and I was walking the dog when I met a guy walking his dog. He was off a 140-foot boat with a substantial, crisply uniformed crew and could not stop complaining how the Bahamas government had charged him $250 for a 6-month cruising permit and fishing license. The same rate I paid, by the way. He went on and on, how they don't have lighthouses or buoys, etc. He had to be paying that much to dock for the night, let alone crew and fuel. Boat probably cost $10 million or more. I ended the conversation by saying that I'd paid more than that for the bottom paint which kept barnacles from growing on my hull. A friend of mine who has considerably more money than me, although admittedly that doesn't take much, was always asking me to come on expensive trips with her, and I had to keep turning her down because I couldn't afford it. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, go on, treat yourself," and I'd have to explain that I literally don't have the money. It's not that I can't or don't want to spend it, it doesn't exist in my bank account. I eventually had to sit her down and explain that I'm poor. I told her about how I couldn't afford to buy much food, so during work days I'd live off the fruit tree and coffee at the office. I showed her how all of my shoes have holes, so I'd line them with plastic bags to stop the rain getting in. I explained that I cut my own hair and washed my own clothes in water with no detergent. I pointed out that I'd long ago put all of my possessions that had any sort of value on eBay. I wasn't trying to get sympathy, I was only trying to explain why for the 100th time I was turning down her invitation for shopping trips or girls' nights or weekends away. She looked at me and nodded in understanding. I know what you mean. Things have been really tight for me recently. I'm so skint at the moment that I've had to cut my weekly manicure and spa days down to just 2 a month. What insane ways has the universe indicated that it could kill you at any time? I once had an elevator drop more than 10 floors rapidly before deciding to work properly. Let me explain. This happened to me at the Land Title building in downtown Philadelphia. I was visiting a friend on the 20th floor, and around floor 15, the elevator suddenly makes a fatigued groaning sound before dropping. Fast. Scared the ever-loving pee out of me as I rocketed down to floor 5 before it slowed, stopped, and reversed course back up again. I noped. I hit the button for every floor so the fricking thing would just let me off, and I walked down the stairs and out of the building. I never did get to visit my friend. What random horrors has the universe subjected you to, only to say, haha, got ya, right before the point of no return? And don't tell me this didn't or can't happen. It happened. When I was 10, I was on a helicopter visiting an island off the south coast of England. Everything was going smoothly until the helicopter turns on its side and proceeds to nosedive for a good 10 seconds toward the sea. Needless to say, this had everyone screaming and scared crapless. The helicopter suddenly levels off and the pilot comes onto the PA system and says, "Oh, sorry people, I could have sworn I spotted a dolphin. Won't happen again." I now hate helicopters. I think I've played Battlefield 3 with this guy. I'm a private pilot. One time I was nearing the airport to land. I hit the switch to put the landing gear down and only 2 lights showed up, indicating that the 2 main gears were down, but the nose gear was not coming down as well. So, if all else fails, I'd either have to raise the gear and do a belly landing, or do a landing with only 2 gears, which would be even more dangerous. But first I went back away from the airport to try and work out the problem if possible. I tried raising the gear and re-lowering it. Same problem. 2 lights but no nose gear. Because the gear comes down from the force of gravity, I tried pulling a few Gs to force it down. Nothing. I tried wiggling the rudder since the turning mechanism is connected to the nose gear. Nothing. Maybe a few more Gs? Nothing. Finally, I remembered what the instructor had told me in passing when I was getting checked out in this particular aircraft. The lights for the gear are interchangeable, so that if one is burnt out, you can switch them around. So I went to switch them just in case the nose gear light was burnt out. As soon as I touched the light to change it, it came on. Whew. In the end, the light wasn't all the way into the socket, and that's what the problem was. I did a low pass over the tower so they could visually check that the gear was down just to be sure. I landed successfully in the end. In conclusion, landing gear wouldn't come down on my plane. Turned out that the light showing the gear's position was faulty, and I discovered it as I was at the end of my options before deciding on an emergency gear-up landing. I have a feeling that anyone who's entertaining ideas of getting their pilot's license is probably going to get a good brief of things that might put them off that particular vocation here. It's definitely not something for the light-hearted. I once studied abroad in Cyprus, and during Thanksgiving break I decided to go to Spain for the week. No one else wanted to go, so I went alone. It was incredible. I saw Madrid, Toledo, Sevilla, Granada, and Barcelona, in that order. I was supposed to take a bus back to Madrid to catch my flight back to Cyprus the next day. When I got to the bus station with all of my luggage, to take the last bus of the night around midnight, I noticed my wallet had been stolen. I had it when I got on the subway, so between getting on the subway and 10 minutes later when I got off and walked to the bus station, someone had taken it from me. My cash, debit card, and credit card were all stolen. I had no way of making purchases. My prepaid phone was out of minutes. I was effectively homeless in a foreign country. I went into the nearest bar where I told the bartender my story. He drove me back to his place after his shift ended at 3 a.m. He looked up the next available train and gave me €150 to pay for said train, subway tickets, and food. He drove me to the train station, I got on the train and made my flight the next day. I've since wired him back his money. If it weren't for his kindness, I'd be living on the street in Barcelona begging for change. How about the next time this happens, if you don't find a nice bartender, you go to the embassy before panhandling? I was studying abroad on a cruise ship, semester at sea program, and crossing the Pacific in the middle of winter. Spent about a week pitching and rolling on 30 to 40 foot high waves. It wasn't uncommon to pitch 45 degrees to the right, only to get tossed back 45 degrees to the left. At one point, we got caught between 2 bad storms and hit with a rogue wave. It was over 80 feet high and crashed out the windows on the bridge and caused some electrical issues that stopped our engines. Tremendous damage to the rest of the ship. I was sleeping at the time and my bed ripped out of the wall. We prepared to abandon ship into lifeboats, and I knew that we were all dead if we did that, as the Coast Guard was about a day out and there was no way the lifeboats would survive the rough waters. Literally, as we're getting ready to go out on deck and board the lifeboats, one of the engines starts working again and we don't have to evacuate. We literally zigzagged our way to Hawaii and spent 2 weeks chilling while the boat was repaired. I was once young and kind of a moron. My friends and I loved to play in construction sites. Many of the neighborhoods in the area I grew up in were just being developed. Anyway, so we're messing around and we see these dump trucks dumping lots of black dirt, topsoil for lawns. So we're playing on the dirt piles, being little monsters, when a truck backs up and dumps a full truckload of dirt right on me. Even as a little nerd, I understood the immediate, overpowering, screaming urge to get the frick out now, now, now. I was running, scrambling, falling on this moving dirt pile, trying to reach the edge before it buried me completely. Which it did. I thought the classic line, "Oh, this is how I die. Weird." Just my hand was sticking out when the dirt stopped pouring. I immediately felt my friend's hands clawing the dirt away, and it couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt like eternity. I now understand the reason why people get trampled and whatnot in disasters. I don't like to think about it, but I probably would have pushed my own mother out of the way. I was so overcome with a singular thought: survive. When I was about 15, I took a trip to Vermont with my grandparents and my similarly aged cousin. We decided to go to one of those scenic overlooks that's nearby. It turns out to be a 50-foot-tall waterfall. Scenic overlooks not really being our thing, my cousin and I decided to ditch the geezers and climb around behind the fall and check out the view from the top. We make it up there, grab onto a tree, and waved our arms madly to catch the attention of the old folks. At the same time they glance up, my cousin slips towards the falls. I grab him, but end up losing my footing and falling into the water myself. As the rushing water carries me towards what I assume to be our imminent death, my right foot gets caught between a couple of larger rocks and the water pushes me upright. I find myself standing not 15 feet from the edge of the falls, grandparents in plain sight, and I start yelling at them to take a picture. At that point, I was almost literally crapping my pants. I don't know if anyone else has seen their grandmother screaming in utter terror, but I honestly hope not. My cousin pulled me out with a large branch a few moments later, and we were in serious crap. After the crisis-averted stage, we joined my grandparents on the wooden overlook. Clearly visible from that side of the falls was a giant sign on which all of the names of the people who had died from falling off said waterfall were printed. In conclusion, almost fell off a waterfall, but my leg got caught and saved me. I took a mastodonic bowel movement at a girlfriend's parents' house, and after flushing, as the water level rose and rose and rose, I looked frantically for a plunger. Her family must have been small, delicate poopers, because there was not a plunger to be found. The water level got right to the tip-top and stopped. Fortunately, there was a wire hanger on a hook on the wall. I fashioned it into a makeshift plumbing snake and I rooted out the clog. I rinsed the business end in the sink and reassembled the wire hanger as best as I could. Pulled up my pants, washed my hands, and a spritz of Febreze to kill the stench. Crisis averted. I can't help but notice that the stakes on this last one weren't quite as high as some of the others, but I do recognize the terror of doing this kind of thing in a high-pressure social situation, and I appreciate that it probably felt like a life-threatening situation at the time. I once fell through the ice when I was around 11 years old and I didn't know how to swim. I flailed around wildly and started screaming at the top of my lungs. Then I noticed that the water was only about chest high. Still, it was a fricking cold walk home. I'm surprised I didn't get hypothermia. About 10 years ago, I went for a routine clinic screening because I'm responsible and stuff. The doctor comes out with that horrible bad news face that they all seem to get and just stands in front of me for a minute, clearing his throat and looking uncomfortable. He starts to say something twice while looking at the chart. I'm afraid that, well, it isn't good. He clasps the chart in front of him and appears ready to say something. I glance at it quickly and make out the words transmitted and disease a few times. Suddenly, a nurse kind of jogs out of the office, takes the chart from the doctor, and hands him another one, gives me a smile, and then walks back inside. The doctor looks at the new chart, grins like a kid given the day off school, and says cheerily, "Well, looks like you're all clean." A friend of mine and I were kayaking in the Gulf of Mexico, and I thought we were about to be eaten by sharks. We saw like 6 dorsal fins approaching, and it wasn't until they were about 10 feet away that we realized they were dolphins. You weren't out of the woods. Dolphins love to play, except play for a 600-pound lump of high-speed, ocean-going muscle is not the sort of thing your bones will take much of. You're all, "Look at me, I'm a helpless sack of bones who can't swim with skinny, brittle appendages." And the dolphin is like, "Ah, sweet, bro, let's do flips. I'll totally throw ya, since I weigh 4 times as much and I don't really have a mental concept of broken arm on account of not really having arms." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was once driven off the highway by a woman driving a minivan and simultaneously doing her makeup. I drove for a while in the grassy median zone before being able to jerk back onto the highway. When I looked at the lady again, she looked sad and apologetic, sort of like a puppy when it knows it's chewed on your favorite sandals. Doesn't change the fact that she almost killed me, of course. I had a stroke at the age of 22 in September, but no permanent damage. Real funny, universe. I've got two. I was trapped on an escalator for 10 minutes one time between two floors. I thought I wasn't going to make it. The second one was when I was on an overnight flight coming home. Not many people, and an off-duty flight attendant was in the window seat, asleep. We're on final approach and over the end of the runway when the plane suddenly rolls what feels like 90 degrees. I guess it couldn't have been that steep, but the overhead luggage racks pop open and some loose bags go flying, and before anyone can even scream, the place rolls back level and lands. Maybe 10 seconds tops. The flight attendant wakes up and looks around and we make eye contact and I swear she says, "New pilot." I was totally stunned and pretty sure I peed my pants. Taking a trip through the mountains with the wife, now my ex-wife, in the biggest piece of crap car we'd ever owned. We were about 4 hours from home, going through a small town, when the brakes fail. Thankfully, the car was a 5-speed manual, so I start shifting down to slow down. I spotted an auto parts store while I was coasting, judged it just right and pulled in and parked using the building to finally stop the car. It was a very gentle tap. I then proceeded to jack the rear of the car up and investigate. The rear brakes were completely shot, including the wheel cylinders. Went into the store, bought what I needed for repairs, new brake shoes, cylinder rebuild kits, and some brake fluid. I then proceeded to do a brake job on my car with nothing more than a Leatherman and a full-size, flat-tip screwdriver. This was a mum-and-pup parts store, no loaner tools. I was back on the road within the hour. I guess this was more of a "frick you, universe" story. Years ago, I was taking a break from kayaking, swimming in a river with a bunch of people all around me. I was next to a big pipe running under the water, actually called pipeline. Still not sure the exact reason for the pipe, but I was slowly being pulled to the left. Not thinking of it much, I let it pull me when all of a sudden I'm completely submerged, being sucked down into it. But a random metal rod jabbed into my chest. I hung on to it for dear life with one hand and with the other hand reached out of the pipe to feel around, and I actually feel a handle to pull myself out. When I got out and sat on top of the pipe, I looked around and noticed that everything was crystal clear, and no one had even noticed that I'd almost died right then. Quite the thrill. In Iraq, an IED had gone off on the lead vehicle of the convoy. Once the medevac was called in, another Marine and I went to check the kill zone and the area around the LZ. After a few minutes of looking for wires or detonators, I realized I was standing on a sandbag in the median road. I'd walked on about 7 other sandbags. It was the remains of the IED that had hit the lead vehicle. It was a daisy chain where only one went off. I was walking on them. That was a real pucker factor. The only thing I can think of is a 5.7 earthquake in a building rated for 6. For some reason, I just pictured all buildings having an official rating, and if a quake goes over that rating, the building disintegrates immediately. I have no idea why I find the idea amusing. When I was 16, I started taking birth control pills. A month later, right before my spring break, my left hand started to turn purple and got incredibly painful. At the hospital, after many tests, they found I had a blood clot from damn birth control. They perform an angiogram to search for any more clots. In the process, they discover a freak genetic deformity. I had extra rib bones growing off my spine, and they were pushing on my main artery under my clavicle, resulting in 2 aneurysms, one on each side. After a handful of surgeries, discarding rib bones and removing the aneurysms, they tell me I'm lucky to be alive. The best spring break ever. In short, taking birth control saved my life. I know many people who would echo the same sentiment, but for very different reasons, so congratulations. I hope you found a control method that worked for you. Coming back home from Iraq after my second tour, we stopped in Newfoundland in January. Blizzard-like conditions, we're taking off, and as soon as we get off the ground, the plane falls back onto the runway. The pilot comes on over the net and says, "Well, that was a little weird. We're gonna try and pull off and make sure that everything is okay." Rev up the engines, and then went around for another try. I figured after a 16-month tour, surviving multiple IED attacks, countless firefights, this is where I die, in Canada. Obviously, I made it back okay. But still, flying scares me. One time the brakes went out in a 15-year-old used car I used to own. Of course I was speeding and the light turned yellow. I hit the brakes and they didn't work, but then they locked up. I did a massive 180-degree going all the way across the intersection, coming to a complete stop perpendicular to a car, staring the driver in the face. I laughed, turned around, and drove slowly the rest of the way home. I have one. I got stranded in the Salt Lake Airport once. I was looking at a 23-hour wait for my flight home to Boston, due to snowfall. Suddenly, after repeatedly asking the clerk to find us an alternate route, one opened up that would get us out of Salt Lake and give us an 8-hour layover in Vegas instead. I went from my worst airport moment ever to my greatest in the span of an hour. That clerk is my hero. Part 2, the Vegas to Boston flight ended up having us fly very near major storms in Texas and Oklahoma. The pilots let us know there's going to be turbulence. I somehow find it in me to fall asleep. I woke up with a massive thud from turbulence, and about a second later the plane begins to fall. I went weightless, and my seatbelt kept me strapped in. My wife let out a scream, so do others. I think, this is it, this is how it happens. And then, we regained control. The whole event lasted about 5 seconds. Turbulence backs off a few minutes later and we make it to Boston safe and sound. So, in conclusion, stranded in Salt Lake due to a blizzard. That's bad. Rerouted to Vegas with 8 hours to rip it up. That's good. Plane home to Boston starts falling from the sky. That's bad. Plane levels off and everyone hugs each other. Can I go now? I used to work in a fiberglass testing lab around buckets and buckets of the most flammable stuff you can imagine. Gasoline, ethanol, methanol, etc. There were open 5-gallon buckets of the stuff everywhere on the floor, and the walls were jammed with cabinets holding dozens of metal canisters of explosive liquids in storage. The job was dull. By the vent hood, we kept an old radio plugged into the hood sparkless outlet, and it was our sole entertainment. One day, a guy wheeled past in his chair and caught the radio cord. 5 of us watched the radio, still plugged in, bounce and teeter on the rim of a full 5-gallon bucket of xylene, then slowly pirouette away from the rim and hit the floor. A couple of millimeters to the left and we would have been vaporized. My supervisor, Jerry, one of the least flappable people ever, looked at us and said calmly, "We're gonna need to tape that to the wall." My girlfriend and I were driving to Vegas from San Francisco via Death Valley in a rental car. We were visiting the country. Anyway, we were 30 miles into Death Valley at around 6 p.m. when I realized we probably wouldn't have enough gas to make it to the next gas station, which was roughly 100 miles away. So after driving for another half hour or so, the blinking lights came on, indicating we were on reserve fuel. My girlfriend starts freaking out because our cell phones have no service, and there isn't anyone who we knew to call anyway. So we stopped at the deserted RV park in the middle of Death Valley to try and get some help, all while genuinely fearing running into a bunch of crazy hobos and getting robbed, kidnapped, or murdered. So anyway, the place is devoid of people, so we continue driving on reserve towards Beatty, Nevada. Eventually, the car grinds to a halt and we end up having to pull over to get help. We try flagging down cars for 45 minutes to no avail, until finally some truck that passes us suddenly pulls over and backs up to us. I explain our predicament to him and beg him to drive us to Beatty and back. By this time it was dark and the guy, a really friendly-looking Latino dude, senses that we're desperate and does us the favor. When we actually got to the gas station in Beatty, my girlfriend was so relieved that she started crying. I proceeded to buy a 2-gallon watering can and filled it up with gas. Later, the guy drives us all the way back. He did roughly 40 miles there and back to our car. At this point, I was so grateful that I offered him $200, to which he flat out refused and even offered to tail us to Beatty in case we ran out of gas again. We managed to get to Vegas in the end after being on the road for about 14 hours. But this incident really shook us, but also reminded us that there are truly good Samaritans out there. Jose, if you ever come across this post, I just want to let you know you're an awesome guy. I was on a Navy C-2, a propeller plane, flying back to the carrier with the mail. There are no windows in the cargo section of this plane. Suddenly, in mid-flight, I'm blinded with bright daylight and roaring wind all around me. In a split second, I'm in the crash position out of reflex. I open my eyes and see the sunlight on the floor with bits of newspaper and dust being thrown about by the wind. I hear the engines start to wind down and I feel like the seatbelt is the only thing keeping me from floating out of the seat as the plane starts to plummet. This lasts for a few seconds, but then the plane levels out and the aircrew guys are moving around me. One of them asks if I'm okay and if it hit me. It turns out an overhead escape hatch had come unlatched and landed in the row of seats in front of me. What was your best moment of, "Oh, I'm actually the bad guy here"? I used to work security at a college bar, and we would typically ask people to leave who were too intoxicated. One night I was posted up in the DJ booth because it was our normal shoulder-to-shoulder level of busy, and I watched this guy start stumbling and drinking his beer in a really weird way. I make my way over to him and tell him he has to leave because he's too drunk. He tries to tell me something, but I can't understand what he said because the music is so loud and he was slurring his words. We get outside and he tells me that he has cerebral palsy, which was pretty obvious after the fact. He was cool about it and I let him back in, but I don't think I've ever felt like a bigger jerk than that night. I have a buddy who has muscular dystrophy. Once, while in the liquor store, he had a bout of paralysis and collapsed. The reaction from everyone in there was along the lines of, "Oh great, another drunk," until he told them he has muscular dystrophy and physically can't get up. He said it was kind of funny watching them to all scramble to help him after that. You know when you get in an argument with someone and you come up with the perfect solution for the situation after the fact? About 2/3 of the trains I get on from Dublin to Cork, someone is sitting in a pre-booked seat that doesn't belong to them, whether it's mine or another person. And these people have all been cantankerous old geezers who have no desire whatsoever to shift themselves from a seat they didn't reserve. I had a man who was probably in his 80s stand up to his full height, a foot shorter than me, and bellow in my face that he didn't care that I booked the seat. He wasn't moving, while his shrew wife looked on with an air of proprietorial approval. It's pretty rotten. Finally, however, last month I boarded a train and someone was sitting in my seat with his partner, and I was just the right combination of tired and stressed to let him have it. I'd been waiting for months for my moment. I showed him my ticket, told them it was my seat, and insisted they move. I channeled Seinfeld for the first and hopefully last time in my life, and finally stormed off up the train when they continued to sit in my seat, full of righteous vindication that I was going to get my way. Finally, I was going to get one over on the train. No longer shall I back down to the whims of rude commuters. Now it is they who shall yield to the righteous powers of reservation. I went up to the staff cabin, asked for an administrator, told him the situation, and presented him with my ticket. This was met with, I see the problem here, sir. You've reserved a seat on the 6 o'clock train. This is the 4 o'clock train. I'd booked the ticket for 6 p.m. and become mixed up with the 6 in the 1600 or 4 p.m. train. I was mortified. I meekly took a seat near the opposite end of the train and didn't say a word to anyone else for the next 3 hours. In my quest to defeat the rude commuter, I had become what I hated most. The narrator, a mostly very diplomatic person, also feels like the 1 or 2 times he's decided to stand up for himself in his life, he has completely misjudged the situation and looked like a complete moron. Ah well. Pulled out of the gas station and this butthole was riding my bumper, honking his horn and waving and pointing. I pulled over, throwing my arms up ready for the altercation because I'd done nothing wrong. Turns out I drove off without closing my gas cap. Wasn't really such a big deal for how he was acting, but he was just trying to help. I apologized and thanked him. In high school, there was a kid who I unwittingly bullied. I actually thought he was a cool guy, and my friend group and I roughhoused a lot. Headlocks, finger circle game, dead legs, etc. I was just doing what I did with everyone I get along with. One day I came up behind him and did that thing where you kick someone's back leg into their front leg while they're walking and they trip on their feet. He turned around with fear and anger in his eyes and yelled, "Why do you have to be such a jerk to me all the time?" My heart sank to my feet. I didn't realize that what I saw as friendly bonding play he found really intimidating. We talked it out and I spent the rest of my high school days being really nice to him. The weirdest part is that he was a pretty popular kid, not small by any means, and on a couple of different sports teams. Goes to show, anybody can feel bullied. I have a coworker who jokes around with nearly every coworker. But not me. A few years ago, I was tired and in a bad mood and trying to clock in. She was joking around with me and trying to keep me from clocking in. I thought she herself was just taking a really long time to clock in, but I lost my temper and I yelled, "Will you hurry up already?" She's never joked around with me or even been that friendly with me since. Realizing that the reason my partner and I are always fighting is because I'm always picking fights. I'm still working on trying to fix this. I was at a restaurant doing a coworker dinner thing when I noticed the woman at the next table was staring me down, like barely blinking, full-blown eye contact. After a while, I started getting pretty agitated when my subtle social cues to stop staring at me went wholly ignored. After about 20 minutes of this, I'd had enough of this lady's unsolicited rudeness, and I did the whole "come at me, bro," arms in the air move, thinking that surely that would get my point across. I made a fairly big production of it. Only then did I realize that this lady was completely blind. When my sister was 13 and I was about 10, we were in a food court at the mall. A gentleman wearing a black suit and dark glasses was seated next to us. My sister looks at him, back to me, and says, "Hey, I think that guy's in the FBI or something." I was like, "He's blind," and the blind guy tried to suppress a smile. Went to a friend of a friend's house to chill out. He was a nice kid, but his house was crazy dirty. Dishes stacked to the ceiling, laundry strewn like carpet, old takeout food bags from a ton of places everywhere. Bags of garbage just lying in piles in the kitchen. The place stunk to high heaven, and I had trouble getting comfortable. Later, I commented on how dirty the place was to my friend. Turns out the guy's mum was terminally ill, and the guy had to help take care of her and his younger sibling, all while being a typical teenage boy. I felt bad for judging him. 2 weeks ago, I was dropping someone off at Union Station. As I was exiting the parking lot, there was one of those gate things where you insert your ticket. I inserted my ticket, and the person behind me began honking. The gate was literally in the process of lifting up. I laid on the horn, screaming, "Okay, I'm going!" But they kept honking anyway. I hit the accelerator and zoomed off, flicking them off for good measure in a very obvious way. I drive a convertible, so I can put my hand right out the top. I was furious at them for honking for me to go when it was clear that I couldn't go any faster. I exited and turned left. A few moments later, that same car exited and also turned left and pulled up to me. They put down their window and I put mine down. Yes, everyone, you can have windows up while in a convertible. It reduces the effect of the wind. And I was like, "What the frick do you want, huh?" The lady in the other car said, "You left your coffee mug on the back of your car." She wasn't even mad. I was totally shocked. I looked behind me and sure enough, I'd set my tumbler on top of the trunk and she had been honking to try and let me know. I turned red, burst out laughing, and told her I was so sorry for being such a jerk. I pulled over and got my cup. I couldn't believe what a butthole I'd been and how coolly she responded to the whole thing. This was my mum's moment. She was driving me and my brother home from the store when we were young, when she drove through an intersection screaming, "You've got a stop sign, lady," out the window at a person that she nearly hit. 10 seconds later, my mother realized that she was in fact the one who blew through a stop sign. All she did was, "Oh." Like any good kids, we still to this day yell, "You've got a stop sign, lady," at her. I was driving home one day and a person in the car next to mine waved at me. I went to wave back, and my hand instinctively flipped the other person off instead. Holy crap, you're like a reverse Mr. Bean. Mr. Mean. Used to think it was funny to quote Dodgeball and say, "You're adopted, your real parents don't even love you." I wish I could say that I learned my lesson the first time when I said this to someone who responded with, "Actually, I am adopted." I won that particular lottery twice. The narrator has been witness to not one, but 2 yo mama jokes, in which the recipient turned out to have lost said parental figure recently. It just feels like tempting fate to use any sort of parent-related joke these days. It was the moment I realized that I was in fact responsible for everything I did while mentally unstable. I spent years alienating everyone I knew by demanding that they forgive my crappy behavior because it wasn't me, it was my bipolar disorder. Everyone else was the bad guy because they just didn't understand my illness. I was the victim. One day it just kind of clicked. No matter what the cause, I was the one who was hurting the people around me. It wasn't on them to understand and forgive my endless parade of insanity. It was on me to get help and stop being so toxic to everyone around me. It was that epiphany that really helped me turn the corner. While I'd sought help before, it was always with the mindset that I had no responsibility and therefore no control over my illness. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Dang, this kid that we called Dino Kid because he always acted like a dinosaur at recess. We'd chase him around and poke fun all the time. Nothing big ever happened, but once we, as a class, were educated on ASD, everyone accepted the guy so quickly. The guy was so damn good at Guitar Hero. My fiancé is a 34-year-old man who sometimes, almost every day, acts like a T-Rex stalking me. It's adorable and I love it, but sometimes he gets really self-conscious because he's afraid I'm going to make fun of him for it. I've never in over 3 years together. I think he has dino PTSD. So, one time I was in a high school assembly and a bunch of kids in pajamas started walking into the auditorium. Pajamas were against the school's dress code. Me, thinking I was funny, yelled, "Hey, that's against the dress code." Turns out it was the special ed class. I really felt like a jackass. I couldn't make myself small enough in that crowd. I thought I was saving someone from a bad marriage. I realized I was just convincing them to cheat on their husband. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. It wasn't me, but it was amazing to see. I was at Starbucks sitting outside along with a number of other people. A gym rat-looking guy starts drawing attention to himself and pointing at people saying, "Is that white Chevy over there your car?" After a couple of these outbursts, a guy sitting near me says, "Yeah, that's my car." The gym rat righteously said, "You're a royal jerk for parking in a handicapped spot. How can you be so selfish when someone who needs that spot might show up at any time? For all you know, he already drove through the parking lot, couldn't find the space, and he headed back home empty-handed. Blah, blah, blah." The car owner, "I'm sorry, I'm handicapped. I forgot to hang the tag when I left the car." The gym rat, "Oh, really?" At this point, the car owner, who'd been sitting down and showed no signs of handicap, stands up. The guy is basically bent in half, like his spine is fused in a 90-degree angle. He looked perfectly normal sitting down. Okay, I'll go to the car and hang the tag." The gym rat, upon seeing him stand, "Sorry, you don't have to do that." The car owner slowly and uncomfortably walks the 40 feet to his car, opens the door, fumbles to hang the tag, and then ambles his way back to the seat, rigidly bent the entire time. When I was in grade school, I had a serious problem keeping my mouth shut. Basically, if a thought popped into my head, I was freaking saying it. The teachers didn't exactly appreciate the constant blurting out, but one time I really crossed the line because I made fun of a perfectly sweet girl just because her mum smoked. F you, former self. I was already a problem child, and while I wasn't technically expelled, I did have to leave and go to a different school. So yeah, basically expelled, but off the record. What's worse is that it took about 2 years of sulking for me to finally realize that I had it coming. Every bit of it. Gosh, I can't believe how much of a craphead I was. I was a freshman in high school. I don't know why it occurred to me, but I figured that if you rubbed the little cage that held your books under the desk the right way, it would resonate and make this loud humming sound. I'd sit there and wait for the teacher to turn her back and start. She'd turn around and look at the air conditioner vent that was right above me. Of course, when she did, I would stop. She'd look bewildered and then turn back around. Of course, I would start up again. Being the quiet kid, no one in the class suspected me. It was hilarious. Until they closed the classroom down for a couple of days because they had concerns about the air conditioners malfunctioning. When I was 10 or so, a friend of mine got appendicitis, so the teacher asked us to write letters of support to her. Little me thought I could troll her in the same way I could do in the internet, which isn't even justified online, by the way. So I wrote an entire letter joking about her condition, wishing it got worse, and saying in the end that it's all a joke and I wish she got well. The teacher came to class mad and disappointed, and proceeded to read my letter without saying my name. I instantly knew I'd messed up, and I never did it again. Never did it again? How often do your friends get appendicitis? Actually, last year I got appendicitis, and my friends didn't write prank letters. Oh no. They visited me at the hospital and told me the most effed up jokes so that when I laughed, my abdominals hurt like a B word after the surgery. Let's just say I got what I deserved. I would say that this seems like a banter thing that the teacher might have misinterpreted, but then again, not many 10-year-olds can pull off that level of dark humor. I know that it's the kind of thing I'd write to certain friends if they were in hospital. I was the assistant manager of a fast food place in college. A bunch of punk rocker-looking guys my age came in to eat, around the same time as some soccer mums with little kids. One of the punk rock kids was pretty intimidating, easily a foot taller than me and built like an athlete. They were all perfectly nice when they ordered their food, but once they got their cups to fill up their drinks, the big guy started screaming and cursing at the top of his lungs, "Mother fricking pig fricker son of a B-word!" The mums all looked horrified. I'm normally quite averse to conflict, so I was quite proud of myself when I marched around the counter and got right up in this big dude's face. I looked him straight in the eye and told him that if he had a problem acting like a human being, he needed to get out of my restaurant. He looked back at me and almost started crying. He whispered, "I'm sorry," and turned around and walked away. He looked absolutely destroyed, and his friends followed him trying to console him. Either that guy legitimately had Tourette's, or the whole group of them was pulling a prank and were absolutely the best actors I've ever seen. Oh gosh, I still feel bad whenever I think about this. So about a year ago, I was on a long international plane flight. I always book the aisle seat because I have a GI disorder that means I sometimes have to get to the bathroom with very little notice. So being trapped in the middle or window seat is suboptimal. I get all seated for my flight, which is the second leg of probably 12 or more hours of travel, and I'm so exhausted I start to nod off before boarding is even finished. I'm awakened by a man politely asking if he can have my seat. Groggily, I explain that no, sorry, I set this up this way because of an illness I have, and I get up so that he can have the window seat. It was a small flight, so no middle seat at least. The nerve of some people, right? If you wanted the aisle seat, why didn't you just choose it beforehand, random dude? The world doesn't revolve around you. Well, about 3 hours into my flight, I woke up again, feeling slightly more human, and I end up having a conversation with my roommate. And within about 5 minutes, I discovered that no, he wasn't asking to switch seats, he was telling me that I was in his seat. Apparently, the airline had switched who was seated where so that he could be closer to his wife and daughter, who was sitting across the aisle. I hadn't looked at my electric boarding pass since going through security, so I didn't notice the change. I apologized profusely and offered to switch immediately, but the poor guy just said it was okay and declined. Ugh. I should probably mention that I'm a short, baby-faced girl, which probably made it worse as this middle-aged guy clearly had no idea what to do about a small, early 20-something girl who looks more like a 12-year-old than anything, telling him he couldn't have his assigned seat. Honestly, that dad might have secretly loved having some personal time. Yep, because of that inconsiderate chick in the aisle seat, I had to do nothing but watch a movie, read a book, and nap for the whole 12-hour flight. Sorry, honey. I've flown a lot with our daughter, sometimes alone and sometimes with my wife. That's not a lot of difference in my opinion, as the main difficulty is just the endless activity and interruptions. It's not difficult as much as relentless. If the kid is in between the parents, neither of them gets much rest. Now, if the poor mom was stuck with 2 kids, then you truly are a monster. In middle school, I pulled some really creepy stuff on a guy I liked, as in an insane amount of physical stalking. I memorized his schedule only through following him everywhere, and I always appeared in the same place he was. I took one of his belongings that he forgot somewhere and took an assignment of his that was posted on the class corkboard because I just wanted his stuff. At the time, it didn't even occur to me that what I was doing was messed up. All I thought about was, how can I be around this person without having to interact with him? It's been over half a decade since then. If I did any of the crap I did as an adult, I would have been arrested with at least a few restraining orders. My friends told me it was messed up, but I refused to listen. I probably did some serious, permanent mental damage to the poor kid. I hope he's managed to recover, and I hope he never has to worry about anything like this again. He deserves the relief. My best friend's younger sister had a weird headband on one day. We were in high school at the time, so she was in middle school. She and my friend didn't really get along, and she was kind of mean to me too, so I saw an opportunity to tease her and said, "Nice headband." Turns out she had cosmetic surgery of some kind to make her ears stick out less, and the headband was there to cover her surgical wounds. I sure felt like a butthole. This actually happened yesterday. It's not that bad of a thing, but I was driving on a road and I saw someone on a side street pull out onto my road right in front of a girl that was trying to cross the street. Immediately, I got teed off that this D-bag almost hit a girl just to be fast. So I followed him for about 30 seconds until he parked, so I drove right up next to him and said, "Hey, butthole, you almost killed that girl back there. What the frick were you thinking?" He looked confused and just said, "Dude, she waved me ahead and let me go. What the frick are you talking about?" Immediately, I started to apologize, telling him that it looked bad from where I was, but yeah, I went from hero to zero real quick. I broke up with a close friend and made up with them recently. I was being emotional and lashed out, questioning their friendship because they wouldn't drop everything they were doing for me. I know now that I'm wrong. My friend has always been there for me, and I still feel bad even though I apologized. I'm a bad friend. Got into a fist fight. We were equally sized and matched, but I came out on top. For those of you who've ever been in a fist fight, you know that line you're not supposed to cross? You know, when the fight should be over, but you throw another punch anyway? I crossed that line. I threw several more punches. I wasn't proud afterwards. I'm not entirely sure this fits, but I'll put it down anyway. I used to be insanely shy and thought everyone hated me for no reason because they wouldn't talk to me. Turns out I was intimidating because I never wanted to talk and was too scared to be around them, so they eventually gave up. Since then, I've been trying to make an effort to be nice and say hi to everyone, but I'm still struggling a bit. In first grade, I was making fun of a short boy without realizing I was hurting his feelings. It got to the point where I'd upset him so much he buried his tiny first grade fist right in my stomach. I was left lying on the playground trying to catch my breath. Sort of an eye-opener then and there to treat people the way I wanted to be treated. Good on him for jumping to make sure he actually could get you in the stomach. My dog was barking for no reason and wouldn't stop after I yelled at him 3 times. I turned around and he's at the door looking at me with his derpy face while the neighbor's dog continues to bark. Sorry, bud. A guy kept bumping into me in line at a theme park. I kindly asked him twice to back up a bit and give me some room. The 3rd time I turned right around and raised my voice a little and started to show some irritation. This guy was clearly on the spectrum. Parents and family shuffled him back a few steps and apologized to me. I almost cried from embarrassment. People who've clicked on really risky-looking ads, what actually happened when you committed? My dad, rest him, kept getting viruses on his laptop because of these ads. But it's the specific ones that chat at you by name, you know? So he knew, in retrospect, that these ads were what was messing up his computer, but he kept falling for them because they'd address him by name. So he always figured that it must be someone he knew, because they wouldn't just chat and call him by his first name otherwise, right? Oh, Dad. Oh gosh, I used to work at one of those places that provides captions for hearing-impaired telephone users, and I listened to one side of a call between an old man and his adult daughter. Dad, I told you to not click on those links. No, I'm not replacing another computer for you. I told you not to click on those links. Those are not real girls. It's a scam. Do you really think there are single girls in your area? In North Dakota? You're 85 years old. Why would they want to meet you? It went on a while longer with more in the same vein. It was the second funniest crap I'd heard at that job, even if it was a little sad when the daughter acknowledged that she knew her father was lonely. Used to be one of the people who bought these ads to promote those sites. 90% are cash grabs, populated by bots or paid girls to lead guys on. They have some real users. Most of the users are still bots or hired folk. You might even end up talking to Misty, who is actually Devinder from India. It's cheap to get real humans from developing countries. I clicked on one of them that told me, "This game will make you come in 2 minutes." Out of curiosity. Played some Star Trek derivative game for about 6 months and it was actually kind of fun. I never came while playing it though. A couple of years ago, a young guy, he must have been a teenager around 16 or 17, came to my door and told me that he's looking for this girl, who he met through some stupid explicit dating site, and she gave him my address to meet. I told him that I live here by myself, I'm a 28-year-old man, and all of the women who've been here since I moved in here are not from that particular site, I believe. But he was too adamant and was sweating hard by now, so I asked him to come in and sit and gave him a glass of water. Then I asked him how much he had paid for that, and he looked down and said $750. So again, I asked how he'd managed to pay, and he replied, "Mum's card." So after a small unofficial counseling session, I convinced him to call his parents to my place and played a mediator between the two parties. We, all adults, decided to report this to the police since my address was also used for the fraud, and Mother immediately blocked her card. Family invited me for dinner for keeping their son calm during a panicking situation, and we all laughed over a drink after the poor kid went to sleep. Honestly, that's probably the best possible resolution that could have come out of the situation, even with the $750 down the drain. Also, this topic is by its nature going to talk about the kind of content where actors take their clothes off and do the deed together. To avoid getting demonetized, I'm going to use the word prawn instead of the usual one. Case in point, I clicked one of the ads for one of those $1 trials to one of the big-name prawn sites. Reality Kings, maybe. This was a while ago, I don't really remember. I figured I'd see what might make prawn actually worth paying for, and either way, I'd only be out $1. First, it ended up being $2, not because of any weird fees, but they charged my card twice. But I trudged on because, what's $2? And I can complain to them later. So I get their email like, "Thanks for signing up for the trial. Click here to check out our content." I click there. I immediately get 2 more emails being charged twice in the amount of something like $40 each. At this point, I don't even bother. I immediately close everything and fire up their customer support. I tell them that I paid $1 for a trial, got double charged, and proceeded to click on the link given to me in the email thanking me for signing up, and then was instantly double charged $40. The support rep told me I was charged because I went to a premium area not included in the free trial, and by going into that area, I automatically agreed to pay for a full subscription. I told her, no, I clicked on the link you sent me, I'll be taking a refund. She said they don't give refunds. I told her that they'll give me a refund or my bank will be giving me it. Suddenly, they magically gave refunds. I never got the $2 chargeback, but $2 to learn that even the big-name prawn distributors will try and screw you out of your money, so I shouldn't ever bother actually paying for that content was all right in my book. A friend in an online game was active military in Afghanistan. He used to joke that he'd see those ads, "Beautiful girl 3 miles from your location wants to meet you," and he'd be like, "Get the frick out of there, you're in danger. This is not the time to be looking for guys on the internet." A serious reply here. One day I was curious, so I just thought, F it, and I signed in with a fake ID. It was some kind of dating site where men are only sporadically allowed. Of course, I was one of the happy few. Fancy that. The site itself seemed like a regular dating site. The main difference was that a ton of ladies were sending me messages. They actually seemed really interested, but obviously they were all bots. They wanted you to sign up for a premium account for a monthly fee, but I was not curious enough for that. It was quite the anticlimax. I like those meet local randy women in your insert small town area because I always think, wait a minute, I am one of those right now, so why aren't they asking me if I want to hook up with guys in my town? My old roommate got scammed by advertisements like this. Bought a book for $50, called the Iron Man's Wang. It gave him exercises and stuff to do to grow his eggplant's size. It obviously did nothing, but he didn't stick with it for very long and gave up. When he told us about it, we told him he was scammed. Where can one find this book? I'm asking for a friend. I clicked on the fruit one, not out of real interest, but just to hear the bullcrap. It was at least a 30-minute PowerPoint slideshow type video with a guy talking about his tiny wang and how it's now huge. He talked about eating this magical fruit from the Congo because black people in Africa are hung, but you have to eat it with certain other fruits. He never mentions any of the other fruits, by the way, and then says he made pills out of the fruit's magical eggplant-growing ingredients. I bought pills for my member, and they gave me stomach issues for about 6 months. I have to admit that I was incredibly surprised that there were hot local singles in my small town. My grandma's boyfriend started paying $7 to send a message, $7 to open a message, to a pretty Thai girl online. They fell in love, so my mother made a fake account and got the same girl to propose to her within a single message. My grandma didn't find out that my mother had done this, but she did see the evidence of the rest, and that boyfriend is no more. I have a story from the other side of this. I used to be a bottle server at a nightclub. I had these regulars who would often come in once, twice, or 3 times a week. They would rack up bills oftentimes as high as $3,000 on a regular basis. They were quite young, probably late 20s. My club charged every card an automatic 20% gratuity. They knew this, but they would always throw in an extra $100 for me. They were almost always on a substance while they were partying, and they often tried to convince me to take some while working. Yeah, fat chance, I love my job. They would get like 6 bottles of champagne and just hand glasses to anyone who walked by. I served them consistently for months. They were always very secretive about what they did to make all that money. Over time, I pieced together enough little bits of information I'd gathered from various members of the group at various times, and finally figured out the source of their wealth. They stole people's identities and credit card information through pop-up ads on adult sites. They were all computer wizards and seemingly worked separately and independently, but had somehow found each other through some underground community meetup of hackers and scammers, if I recall correctly. By then, I believe they'd begun working together quite frequently, but I'm unclear on their working relationship, just not the nature of their business. They claimed to make hundreds of thousands per month doing this, and they certainly spent money like that was the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a gross exaggeration, as I'd caught them embellishing various different things on numerous occasions. I've tried playing the racy-looking games, but they never actually show the fun bits of the body, and they're boring. And it's always a looping gif of some SFM prawn montage of an Overwatch character or something. Or this one, I only remember it now because it made me laugh so much. It was a really crude animation of a guy and a girl doing the deed, and in the background there was a girl with a really large sombrero, really violently strumming on a guitar. It was just so ridiculous looking. I shan't forget it for a while. A channel I used to watch went out of their way to play these sorts of games whenever they popped up, properly censored, of course, for YouTube. It feels like from the amount of censoring going on, a lot of them do actually show naughty bits and the doing of the deed, but maybe they were better at finding those. I was a young 18-year-old lad and bored. I saw the usual ad of click here for fun girls in your area, and I thought to myself that I had fraud protection, so I was all good. The website took my entered card info and immediately started racking up random charges for gift cards and premium hotmail.com services. I guess that's a thing. I called the bank support line, quite nervous as I was paying for adult services and was still uncomfortable talking about that kind of thing. The guy at the bank was a total bro and literally said, "Oh, you lost your card at the mall. I'm sorry to hear that. Let me reverse those charges and get you a new card." Never once had I mentioned a lost card or the mall. Would have been a live customer if they hadn't closed that branch. There was one about psychology of women and how to get laid more often. Spoilers, it's a man on a 30-minute video talking about nonsense. Then at the end, he gloats about his money. I now know the secret to getting laid more often. Find a girl, talk to her about nothing important, tell her I have money, invite her to my place. Apparently it works 2 out of 3 times. I saw an ad about a video on how to do the deed longer while controlling exactly when you splooge. The curiosity got the better of me, so I clicked on it. The video was about 34 minutes long. The first 10 minutes was just about a guy talking about how he'll tell you the secret in just a few minutes. He rambled on and on about how he was a loser in college and the army. He talked about how he struggled through basic training, but he managed to power through it by putting mind over matter. So he thought he could try putting mind over matter when it came to doing the deed. He also showed his before and after pics of his time during school in the army. They weren't even the same person, but he apparently takes home 5 different women every week now. Around the 20-minute mark is when he finally revealed the big secret. The big secret to not arriving and lasting longer is to just not think about it. That's it. So when you're in bed with someone and getting close, just don't think about it at all and your problems will be solved. The last 10 minutes of the video was him advertising something completely different that I can't even remember what it was. I think it was a book or something. I was again curious as to the price of the item, so I clicked on the link, but was redirected to a checkout on a shady website asking if I want to go ahead and pay over $2,500 for a lifetime supply of pills for my eggplant. I probably got a ton of viruses, but now I can go on with my life knowing those videos are bogus. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Speaking of sausage enlargement ads, I hate the ads that you see on relatively tamer sites where the ad is like, "Men need to see this," and it shows some weird clamfish thing that resembles a male member. Either way, the answer is inevitably going to be viruses. Not prawns like all the others, but my grandma clicked on one of those "Get a free MacBook Air for filling out this survey" ads. She did the survey and actually got a MacBook Air. I don't know if she got any viruses, fraudulent charges on her card or whatnot, but they did deliver on their promise. I thought it was neat, but I'd never do it myself. I messaged her on Facebook about it, and she said it ended up costing her money with all the peripherals and Mac services and such, but the base laptop itself was free. I remember when I was about 15, I came across a Russian girl, probably a bot, and I ended up mailing her all the time. They never asked for money, but they just talked about their life and stuff. It was like a pen pal that just sent me pictures of themselves undressed every once in a while. Then one day they just stopped responding, and I haven't clicked any of those links since. I was a terrible 18-year-old who had just moved to a new city for college and knew nobody. Through one of those pop-ups, I found a hookup site that was something cheap, like $3 a month. I signed up for the free account and got some messages, but to reply, I needed to be a paying member. I put $10 on a prepaid Visa card so that if I got scammed, it was only for $10. The 1 month I had the account, I got no messages. The day my month expired, I got 7 messages from different girls who would be way out of my league if they were real. Not stupid enough to fall for it again, I closed my account. $3 spent to learn that those websites are bullcrap is a fairly cheap lesson. Thank you for an actual response. Worth noting, it's not just fake-looking hookup sites that do this. The highly advertised Ashley Madison website does it too. There's basically no real female users on that one. It's all staff trying to bait subscriptions. Literally last night I said F it and clicked on one of the enlargement ads. Literally all it was a 50-minute video of a bunch of women saying that size matters, and if your member is under 7 inches, you're out of luck. Not signed up as such, but a mate of mine met a girl on one of those cam sites you can just flick through, past all of the wangs. Anyway, she was amazing and did everything you want, including getting him to play as well. I added him on Facebook, legit pictures apparently, and she was gorgeous. Next minute, she disappears off camera and instead a video plays of him cranking off. She comes back and says it's going to cost him £500 or she'll send it to his entire Facebook list. He panicked, deleted his entire Facebook account, and to this day is too scared of opening it back up just in case. I didn't commit, but my antivirus program popped up saying that it blocked an attack after clicking one of those ads. In the name of science, I clicked on one of those ads after reading this post, and I'm happy I did, because I just won $1 million and a free gift hamper. See you later, suckers! Hi, I'm a prince of a remote country. If you want to get some more $1 million, send me your bank account information. A lot of people are beginning their stories with, I was 18 years old. Oh, we know you were younger than 18, mate. Well, back when I was younger, it was all adultfriendfinder.com. Believe it or not, I actually met my wife there. We've been married almost 9 years now. Well, I signed up for Adult Friend Finder because I was sick of the runaround on eHarmony, and I just wanted to do the deed with someone. After sending out about 10 messages, I realized most of them were bots. But then I got one message back from a girl that was 9 years younger than me that didn't follow the same template. I was highly skeptical that it was a scam, but we exchanged a few texts, did a video chat, and we met a week later. 2 years later, we were married and have been for 9 years. At first, we told people that we met through friends, then we started saying we met online and being vague about the site. Now we joke about it with people if they really want to know. I mean, the fact that we're 29 stories in and we only just found our first entirely positive one should tell you everything that you need to know about these ads. My dad. He's old. He still thinks you have to pay for prawns. About every 6 months, he goes through an identity theft situation and also has a computer loaded full of viruses. Back when the shady toolbars were still a thing, he'd have 2 or 3 all the time. The last few times I rebuilt his computer, I just left a shortcut on the desktop to uprawn, and then an ad-blocking host file. 9 out of 10 sites saying, fill out a survey or sign up for a free account, take you to a totally irrelevant site to do so and never redirect you back. One of them, I checked the source code, all the click here button did was summon a GIF of a loading bar. Okay, so this was about a year ago, and mind you, I was low on sleep. I'd just finished an 8-hour shift and it was like 7 AM. So I saw an ad that said something like, enroll now for premium and receive a 14-day free trial, or some bullcrap. Anywho, I typed in my info as fast as possible because at this point I'm very sleepy and very in the mood. I then proceed to crank away all of my fears of any charges because damn, it was good to have high-definition prawns. Upon finishing my duties, panic sets in and I quickly check my bank account and a lot of charges were pending. I spent the rest of the day trying to contact someone about cancelling my subscription. Long story short, I ended up calling my bank and thanked the skies it was a guy because I didn't feel like explaining this to a woman. I caught chlamydia, or what WebMD told me was chlamydia, from an ex. I was too embarrassed to go to my doctor, I was in my early 20s at the time, so I went to a shady pharmaceutical site that I'd seen pop-ups for. I used my trusty NetSpend prepaid Visa and ordered as much penicillin as I could afford. I kept popping pills until my wang stopped leaking a few weeks later. So I guess that was a win? I swiped right on a super hot and busty lass. It's a match. Right. I'm sure the 22-year-old with perfect body and skin is interested in a bold 35-year-old single father. It happens all the time. A guy I worked with in a crappy local bar ran one of those websites on the side, as well as a scummy amateur prawn site trying to imitate another one. He was totally upfront with us about how much of a scam it was, basically asking you to pay for everything. Send a message, pay. Receive a message, pay. Open a message, pay. He made some decent money off it and the prawn site to the point where he moved out west to further his career in the prawn industry. Kinda wonder what happened to him. I've been on Adult Friend Finder for a while. Half a year, I guess. I can't remember. But there are some users that are real and would like to explore more. It's just that there are way too many fake profiles on there when compared to a real person. I'd say 3 to 7. Some guy on the Joe Rogan show experimented with all kinds of gas station eggplant pills. Things that he thought would help his performance, and the stories are fricking hilarious. He would say that his eggplant would get so uncomfortably swole like it got bitten by a snake, but he would keep doing it for the girl's shock value. He eventually stopped because the pills are most likely pure poison. After watching a video on YouTube about fraudulent advertisements, I decided to do an experiment. I clicked on one of those games that are advertised, and they need my credit card details to check that I'm a real person. I put in some fake credit card details and suddenly it says I can't enter the site at this time. You'd have to be really dumb to fall for that. Tinder is full of women within 5 miles from me, none of whom want to do the deed with me. I was bored one night and started chatting with a girl from Colospace, now called Color.me. From the very beginning, I knew it was a scam, but I had nothing better to do, so I played along. She kept trying to get me to sign up for her premium site. She would say things like, "It says that they'll charge you, but it won't. It's just so I can send you pics." I played along and said that I'd signed up. She was obviously looking at some part of the system because she started asking me to send her the screenshot of me signing up. The scam was getting so obvious it was cringy by this time. I could tell she was about to give up, so I started saying random tech-sounding stuff like, "Well, maybe it's because the gigabytes don't travel through the Cat5 of my VPN because I'm on a government computer, and the Teradyne sometimes blocks incoming DDoS Wi-Fi requests." She pretends like she understands, and tries to help me troubleshoot it. Eventually I get bored and tell her I'm not giving her any money. She told me to F off and stopped talking to me. There was a time in my teens where I discovered that Yoohoo chat rooms had mature chat rooms where you could meet people for voyeurism and such. At first, it was a lot of fun. I was always in the mood and young and fit, and was not picky at all. Early on, I had a lot of success getting mutual cam sessions between myself and women. It didn't take long before it was overrun by bots who would just try and get you to pay sites. One day, I just decided to follow through one of these camgirl sessions. She wasn't even super attractive and had no one else in her room. It cost me probably about $70, but I was more interested in understanding what her experience doing this was like and such. We just chatted for a bit. Basically found out she was Russian and was hired by a company to put on the shows for terrible pay. Basically, long story short, she ended up quitting the whole camgirl thing because she wasn't getting enough viewers to make it worth it after the middlemen took their cut. We actually exchanged personal emails and kept contact for a number of years. Basically, would send random undressed pictures back and forth, and we still cammed back and forth for mutual voyeurism and fun. And I didn't even have to pay for any of this. Definitely not the outcome you'd normally expect from something like this, but it was fun. She never asked me for money or to try and bring her to the US or anything. We'd just sort of chat when we were bored and in the mood. What's the most pathetic way you've seen someone try to look manly? I once worked in an office where they let us pick out our new desks and order them from a catalogue. My boss came in to check mine out and he noticed it was like 6 inches bigger than his new desk. I came in the next morning and he had made the maintenance guys switch them. He claimed it was because his desk was a better height for me. Shockingly, he turned out to be insane in other ways as well. Who'd have thought it? I once saw a P-plater, Australian for new driver, in a hotted-up car waiting at the traffic lights in the rain. He was facing up a hill, and when the lights turned green, he put his foot on the accelerator hard and attempted to speed off and ended up getting absolutely no traction. This resulted in his wheels just spinning and him doing a kind of stationary fishtail while slowly sliding back down the hill. He ended up missing that green light. I couldn't stop laughing. There's a substance called synthol that some bodybuilders and a lot of wannabe tough guys inject themselves with to create fake muscles. Googling for it leads to gems such as guys that look like Popeye and stick figures in water wings. Not so cool. My voice drops lower when I talk to my father-in-law. I rarely catch myself and talk normal. When I do try to talk normal, I think I sound squeaky. I'm nearly 40 with 3 kids, by the way. My boyfriend does this as well. When he's speaking to my dad, his voice will be unnaturally low, but as soon as you get any alcohol in him, he sounds like a frickin' pixie. It's hilarious! When I was but 12, some kid came into middle school with a beard drawn onto his face in Sharpie. He desperately tried to make everyone believe it was his real beard, that he grew it overnight. I must have hit a growth spurt, he said. I wish camera phones were a thing back then. I started shaving every few days when I was 12 and was mocked for it. I had a full beard by 14 and I still got crap for it. You really can't win. Well, I believe the myth that shaving increases beard growth has been thoroughly debunked. The sir, or bearded madam in this last post, was likely always going to be that way. Post-college, my friends started a cigar night as a guys' hangout night. I thought everyone always said don't inhale cigars because they were wimps and couldn't handle the strong buzz. So I intentionally inhaled with every puff throughout the entire cigar. I got so sick I literally turned a pale shade of green like an old cartoon, and puked for an hour until only foam was coming out of me. I went to a party where there was a 4-man hookah set up. My friend had never tried one and was very curious. It turns out, while everyone enjoyed the hookah for a bit, went off to mingle and come back to it later, my friend spent nearly the entire party at the hookah. He spent the latter portion of the party hovering over the toilet. When I was 12 years old, I was walking into a convenience store with a friend. She was a total tomboy. In fact, she looked more like a boy than a girl. As we're walking in, she sees this sweet mid-60s ragtop Corvette, and she's ogling it. I was too, but she makes this big thumbs-up sign to the hot blonde sitting in the passenger seat. This long-haired moron in his late 20s came running out of the convenience store and yelled to my friend Sabrina, "Hey punk, quit making eyes at my girl." He comes over, grabs my friend's arm, pulls back a fist. My friend is just stark white and speechless. I shout, "She's a 12-year-old girl, what are you doing? Stop!" He finally stops, realizes what the heck he's doing, but, always being a moron, says, "Don't let me see you eyeballing her again, or I'll mess you up." I'm not sure what happened after he drove off, but his girlfriend did not look like a happy camper. I'm hoping she dumped his sorry butt. Back in the MySpace days, I knew a kid who took a pic of himself with his shirt off, and then used Photoshop to turn his skin black and give himself a goatee. He also fancied himself a rapper and took on the stage name Diamond. Yes, with 2 eyes, because he was so hard. Affluent private school kids, am I right? Oh my god. 2 eyes for a double dose of idiot. I was dating this girl a few years ago, and I was meeting some of her good friends for the first time at Chili's. I'd just turned 21 and they were all younger than me, so I thought, I'll look so cool if I order some alcohol. I'd never ordered drinks before, so I didn't know what to order. I'd only been to parties where there was beer. I thought, nah, beer is no good. I need something with liquor. While I was pondering what to order, the waiter asked me what I wanted to drink. At that moment, only one drink came to mind. "Yeah, give me a Cosmopolitan, please." Cue to the waiter bringing me a Chili's branded shaker that I got to take home with a fabulous pink drink in it, and me looking like an offensive caricature of a gay man instead of the Ron Swanson that I thought I'd look like. When the teacher says, "If you don't want to learn, then just leave," someone got up and left and swore at the teacher, grinning at his friends. About 30 seconds later, he came back in saying, "Actually, I kinda need to know this stuff." Honestly, I've got to respect the kid for admitting that and taking the L while looking out for his future. Only barely related, but I had a teacher who would say, "Oh, go fly a kite," if you had a differing idea of what symbolism in a particular book meant. So I packed a folding kite in my backpack, and the next time she requested I go, I did. The detention was worth it. My new dentist is a good-looking 25 or 26-year-old woman. Now I hold off bursting into tears until I get to my car. I had a friend who, when he'd go to the movies with me or one of our other male friends, would always leave an empty seat between himself and us so he didn't look gay. Either that or he got the separate seat because our elbows kept poking him while the rest of us were cranking each other off. I had some friends in high school that would do that when we'd go to the movies. I never knew how to react, so I usually just sat in between them. In high school, I would put Rogaine on my chin and face to try and grow a beard. A bunch of my friends and I were hanging out one time when my best friend's little brother, probably 15 or so at the time, did something very feminine. It was a long time ago, so I don't exactly recall what it was. We all laughed and I yelled at him, "Quick, do something manly!" To which he replied in sheer panic, "I could strip off my clothes and dance for you guys." Needless to say, we never let him live it down. Back in high school, I was friends with a guy on the football team who was pretty much exclusively a bench warmer. Throughout each game, he would discreetly try to rub grass and dirt on his uniform so it looked like he'd seen some action when he ran off the field. My friends and I took up skateboarding one summer and worked at it every day. While we would practice, one of my friends would spend his time rubbing the bottom of his skateboard against concrete corners to make it look like he'd grinded. My freshman year of college in the spring, at the rec pool. The rec pool was the place to be, babes as far as the eye can see. Anywho, my friends and I are out on the pool deck, and I've decided that as we're walking in front of some bikini-clad chicks, that it would be a good time to de-shirt and reveal my awesome torso to them. My shirt got stuck on my neck, and I, blinded by my own shirt, as well as my hubris, fell into the pool with my shirt still around my neck. I was so cool. I took the last place in a hairy chest contest. It's okay, sweetie, I have literally no chest hair or facial hair whatsoever. Of course, I'm a girl, so... Rest assured that if the narrator had competed in that particular tournament, he would have either lost or tied with you. But then again, I know not to enter one. A co-worker of mine was a one-upping, bull-crapping, blatant liar. We'd troll him every day to see how far his lies would go. The one that popped into my head when I saw this group of stories was that he drank a quart of 10W30 motor oil to impress a girl. I have a buddy who was hanging out with us, and he starts with, "Oh, I'm friends with the local college cheerleaders. I'll see if they want to come and party with us." He texts them, and they say that they're still on their way back from a game. Another buddy comes to join us, and we explain who we're going to be hanging out with tonight. He informs us that the game was a home game at 1 in the afternoon, 9 hours before this happened. All the first guy could say was, well, I don't know where they are then." "We know you don't, buddy. I've got a friend just like that. It gets to the point where whenever he says something outrageous, my friends and I just say, 'cool,' and change the subject." Handstand push-ups at a party. "Well, I saw a guy doing dips at the library." I knew this guy that would intentionally leave his fly open on his jeans so that people would mention it and he could reply, "I guess my huge wang is that noticeable." One time I went for sushi on a first date, and I wanted to impress the girl with how much wasabi I could handle with my sushi. I ended up leaving snot all over the place while tears ran down my face. I learned that a friend of mine gets dressed in this order: cologne, white shirt, more cologne, another white shirt, more cologne, another white shirt, cologne again, his normal shirt, and then more cologne. I always just thought he was a pretty swole guy, but I've learned that he's actually pretty scrawny under there. There are 4 shirts? In 5th grade, I had a classmate who always tried to show off. One day, he claimed that he could make his face red in less than 10 seconds. Spectators gathered. He holds his breath in and pushes to build up pressure in his head. Not sure how else to explain it. His face does get ridiculously red, and then all of a sudden we heard a slight pop noise, and his right eye had moved forward literally half an inch out of his head like it was about to pop out entirely. Shrill screams ensued. The teacher was cursing, and then ambulance sirens sounded in the distance. What a man he was. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I guess this counts as attempted manliness? Back when I was 9 or 10, I was at camp. There was this girl that I liked, so in order to try and look cool, I'd take my glasses off and close my eyes real tight. Eventually, she asked why I was doing that, and I replied that if I couldn't see, I gained super hearing and could hear nature all around me. Needless to say, I was, and am, SAP's mammalian brother. "Oh look, I dropped my magnum rubber that I use on my monster dong." One time, I was with a lady friend and my mattress was kind of not aligned properly with the bed spring, and it bothered her. She said, "Let's fix it," and I said, No, I got it, don't worry." As I bent down to push it forward, it was heavier than I expected. I grunted and pushed forward. And as I did this, I tooted really loudly. I once saw a guy with Thug Life tattooed on his bicep in Comic Sans. "Which, do I look like I care about your text preferences? I got this for me, and I got a font that represents me and my life. We from the street, man. We don't have time for all this serif crap. Busy hustling. God damn." "I wear the smallest lab coat I can find, with my regular clothes on underneath it. It looks like I have massive guns." I'd like to tell you that everyone else thinks you look like the Michelin Man, but I don't have the heart to tell you. I once saw a group of high school-age kids in a local park accompanied by a young woman. They're all hanging out, and the alpha kid, in an attempt to impress said girl, gets up and takes his shirt off, and then walks around to all of the picnic tables and starts lifting one side of them up as high as he can over and over again. It was quite clear that he had the strongest pubescent muscles. I peacock by going to karaoke bars and singing Regina Spektor songs in the manliest falsetto possible. At a party in my university, a reasonably tubby guy was trying to chat up a girl. She didn't seem particularly interested but was being polite. The guy gets a text, flips open his phone and starts to read it. Suddenly realizing the faux pas he's unwittingly committed, he proceeds to snap his phone in half as if to say, "I care far more about this conversation than some meaningless phone." The girl realizes that was dumb and immediately leaves, so the boy has no phone and no chance of getting any. Also, I know a couple of 30-plus males that went down and egged the local Occupy protesters. So tough. God damn, that's pathetic. I grew up in a small town and there used to be this idiot that would drive around in a crappy convertible by himself. He had his parents' hi-fi speakers in the back and would drive around talking on his cell phone. The town didn't have any cell phone towers or reception back then. Pickup artists are as hilarious as they are stupid and annoying. I don't know if either of these guys technically count as pickup artists, or if they regularly attempted their stunts to pick up girls, but I wouldn't be surprised. I heard on the radio once that the guys who hung out with Frank Sinatra had a difficult time keeping up with him while partying, so they would get a watered-down Coke so that it appeared to be whiskey, while Frank hit the hard stuff. Big old trucks with a pair of truck nuts hanging on the back of them. I was bringing my wife, who makes fun of how unmanly I am, a bowl of soup, and I filled it pretty high. The tops of my fingers ended up in the soup. To show manliness, I didn't flinch and ended up with blisters on several of my fingers. When I was younger, around 6 or 7, I had to stay at my grand's during the day while school was out. She had this little tricycle that was way too small for me to sit on, so I used to stand on the back axle and drive it around like I was a rally driver. Don't ask. One day she had to walk around the shops, so like any good rally driver secret agent superhero, I gave her support via the Subaru. Again, don't ask. On the way back, we went another route and had to walk past 2 or 3 girls around my age. Wanting to man up, I wanted to act big and hard, so I jumped off the Subaru, lifted the tiny tricycle up and held it vertically above my head like a champion weightlifter. At the time, I was a huge wrestling fan, particularly of The Rock. My favorite part of The Rock was the people's eyebrow. Google if you don't know. I strutted up to these little girls, tricycle above my head, turned to them and gave them the baddest people's eyebrow to ever grace this earth, along with the line, "Ladies?" The only thing that could possibly happen, happened. I fell. The tricycle came crashing onto the floor, elbows and knees were grazed, and there were tears in my eyes. My gran had to carry me home. I was only 6 or 7 at the time, but frick. That still hurts, man. I started dressing nicely and began to improve my vocabulary. Oh well. My mom grew a mustache. Oh wait, I might have misunderstood the topic question. I was working out at the gym and it just so happened that a recent ex of mine was there at the same time. We met at the gym, so this wasn't really a shock. I was at the pull-up bar and she was pretty close by, so I got it in my head that I should try and show off or something. So I started doing lots of pull-ups really fast and intensely, when my hand slipped and I fell off the bar and right onto my butt. I kept my head down and just walked straight into the changing room. It felt bad, man. I got on a plane a few months ago. For my background, I'm male. I put my bag in the overhead compartment and sat down. I looked over and saw a girl. If you must know, she wasn't unattractive. Read, she was really hot. She was having trouble fitting her bag in the overhead compartment. I, being the gentleman that I am, saw the opportunity to assist, thinking that at some point down the road it might lead to something. So I tried for about 30 seconds and then said, "It doesn't fit." I sat down and abort mating rituals. About 30 seconds later, I looked up and another girl had gotten up and helped the first girl put her bag in the compartment, and it fit in like 2 seconds. I don't know what they did, I don't know how they got it, all I know is that I didn't make eye contact with either of them for the rest of the flight. My favorites are the guys who refuse to drink, quote, girly drinks. They don't want to be thought of as gay or a Nancy. It's a drink, yo. The people who try to fight the bouncers or the bar staff in general. There are more of us and the bouncers are sober. Good Lord help you if you touch one of our waitresses inappropriately. We like our hot waitresses and most of them are dating staff members. My cousin has "Sure Thing" tattooed on his forearm in the most gangster-looking letters he could find. He's pretty nerdy but adopted a gangster persona after leaving home and joining the armed forces. I laughed out loud when I saw his Facebook picture showing it off. Flashing the sideways peace sign and trying to look fly with his new tattoo very visible. Cap sideways, of course. I used to skateboard a lot. I also had a slightly overprotective mother, so anytime I went to a skate park, I was that scrawny kid in full pads. I didn't give an F, it meant that I got to skateboard. Anyway, I think I was 13 or 14 at the time. I was minding my own business, probably trying to do a super stylish boneless in a quarter pipe. Don't hate, the old school tricks are rad. And I see this guy bail and just lie in the bottom of the bowl area while his board flew out onto the deck. He was a few years older than me and was obviously not hurt seriously, and there with several of his buddies. Being a nice guy, I grabbed his board, which had rolled close to where I was, and rolled it back down to him. I skated away, not paying attention, and then I hear him yell out, "Who did that?" Apparently, the board had rolled into his side while he was facing the other way. There was no way it had hurt in the least. I'd made sure that it would roll at a safe speed to him. As I turned around to see what the shouting was, I see his buddies pointing at me. "Hey, you want to fight?" he shouts at me. Now, you don't know me all that well, but you can imagine I should be feeling slightly intimidated. And to be honest, prior to this situation, I always thought I would have been intimidated by a bully. Thankfully, the situation gave me some much-needed perspective. I'd just done this guy a favor and he wants to fight me. What the frick, right? Is he serious? "If you want to fight me, I'm right here," I reply with no hesitation. He just kind of stares at me for a second and then turned away. I heard his buddies giving him a hard time and it was like a joyous chorus of angels. I felt like I owned that frickin' skate park for the rest of the day. Getting a motorcycle license to try and be cool and manly. I actually realize it's fricking amazing and that the aforementioned status didn't matter to me once I achieved it. I used to waitress at a bar on the main street of a small town, which was also home to several restaurants nearby. Drunk guys trying bullcrap manliness to hit on me became normal after a while. One night I was walking past two guys sitting at the main bar and one of them flagged me down on the pretense of some bullcrap question about the menu. Then, like a good friend, he started trying to wingman his buddy, telling me how he was such a great guy and thought I was cute, and oh by the way, was on the big NFL team of our state, and that I should be totally flattered that he was interested in me and maybe try to give him my number or go home with him. Meanwhile, said guy is sitting next to us trying his best to look humble. After trying not to laugh at him outright, I extricated myself and for some reason didn't try to explain to him the two main reasons why this tactic was clearly not going to work for them. The first, unlike most people in that town, I do not give a crap about football. The second, his friend was still in his work uniform from the restaurant next door. When did book smarts not necessarily equal real smarts? My boss and I were chatting on the phone about some random work issue. He told me to call so-and-so for some reason. I told him that I needed the number. He said, "Hold on, gotta look up the number on my phone." Shuffling sounds. Oh crap, where's my phone? Damn, Jane, my phone must have fallen out of my pocket. Son of a Mitch. Well, I'm gonna have to call you back once I find it. I cracked up until he jokingly yelled, "Don't you tell anyone about this." Once I got a call from one of my college professors, one of the smartest and friendliest people that I know. Can you pick me up at this address? 30 miles from his place without public transport? Sure. How did you end up there? I went to go and sell my car to this one guy. I joined Mensa for the card. When I went to Kinko's to laminate it, I didn't read the instructions on the wall, and the laminate melted to the machine. I had to get the Kinko's guy to open the machine for me, but by then, the card was bubbling. When he scraped it out and saw what it was, he laughed. He laughed so hard. He thought there was 60 cents in $1. Took him a solid couple of minutes to figure out that there wasn't after we just sat there laughing at him. My wife, the smartest person I know by the way, looked at the sky at about 3 p.m. and asked why the sun was so dim. She was looking at the moon. I mean, I would look up at the moon during the day as a 5-year-old and wonder why it was in the sky. Surely this presumably adult woman could also see it and realize that it was a distinct entity from the blazing ball of light that we can't look directly at during any given time. Brain fart moment, I suppose? I was at law school with a smart guy. We shared a house. He wouldn't heat up anything in the microwave if it hadn't been brought as a microwavable product. He was convinced it would get pumped with radiation and he'd be eating radioactive food. My grandfather is a chemical engineer that used to work for Dow handling startup of some of their biggest plants. He went on to be an expert in industrial cleanup operations. He's a practical genius. He also decided it was perfectly acceptable to put stuffing into a plastic bowl and slide it into a 400-degree oven. I mean, I once put pizza in the oven on a wooden plate I was going to serve it on after, so I'm not going to judge him. We still ate the pizza, but it definitely had a strange taste. I once tried opening a thing of Pillsbury biscuits with a can opener a few years ago. My mother took my picture with it to use it against me in the future. I had a college professor insist that afternoons started at 11 a.m. because that's when we had lunch. I have no idea how you could get that wrong. Afternoon starts afternoon. It's in the damn word. Fun thing about college faculty, they're generally very, very knowledgeable about one thing only, and actually pretty stupid about a lot of other things. That's what you get for spending 10 years devoted to the study of one thing, usually somewhat obscure, to the point where you're probably the world authority on it. Can confirm, my stepfather is a geology professor at a university. The guy can tell you anything about any rock. He can do complex math equations in his head. The guy literally forgets to eat sometimes. He can be completely stumped by a basic math equation if it's written differently than he would expect. It's a good thing he doesn't have a garage, or he would probably have accidentally poisoned himself by now. One time, my friends and I were walking downtown and we were passing through a parking lot. One of my friends noticed this and asked, "Is this a car dealership?" "No, this is a parking lot." So naturally he responded with, "But why are there cars here?" It took a few minutes of explaining for him to remember that cars do tend to park in parking lots. This one is so bad that reading it got me stupid. My boyfriend. We did those 90-second microwavable rice packets and I smelled something burning. I asked, "How long did you put the rice in for?" And he said, 3 minutes. I told him, "It was only supposed to be 90 seconds. And he looked at me like I was stupid and told me, yeah, that's 90 seconds. Then a few seconds later, he turned bright red. I still make fun of him for it. One of my mum's best friends growing up has a brother who is absolutely brilliant. This is a guy who graduated top of his class, got a perfect score on the SAT, and went to and graduated from Harvard. Sometime into his adult life, he decided to go to the grocery store a few blocks away. Ordinarily, he walks, but he decided to drive this one particular time. He went to the store, got his stuff, and proceeded to walk home. The next morning, he went to get into his car, only to discover that it was missing from his driveway. So he filed a police report. A few days went by, and he had to go to the grocery store again. He walked like he normally does, and found his car exactly where he left it a few days before. This is a Harvard graduate. A girl I knew in high school needed a piece of paper, so she turned on the computer and printed one out. I did this, and I still feel smart about it. I needed some special thesis, archival, acid-free whatever paper to print my thesis that goes into the library. There was one printer on campus with the special paper, but when I printed there, one page with a complex graph would crash the printer out of memory. I asked the printing desk there if I could just have some paper from the tray to print it in my office printer. It worked there with the plain paper, and they said no, I couldn't do that. I proceeded to print a single-page, empty document with as many copies as the number of pages my thesis had. They then gave me the stack of printed paper that I needed. Probably the ink in my printer wasn't compatible for long-term storage, but I doubt anyone is ever going to read it anyway. Working at IT support, a woman with a PhD in virology calls up. Her keys on her keyboard keep sticking. We do the standard troubleshooting but couldn't fix it, so I went to her desk. What was the cause of the keys sticking? Well, Miss PhD was eating a whole gosh darn pineapple over her keyboard. My doctor wife, resident at the top university hospital, constantly misuses the words door and window interchangeably. It's a riot. Sweetie, please close the door. Where are you going? The door. Oh crap, I meant the window. This is practically daily. That's fine, the narrator constantly mixes up left and right as well as east and west when he's giving directions, even though he knows full well what each of those directions means if they're given to him. Some of our brains have weird mental blocks on them. About 5 years ago, I got one of those motion-activated air fresheners and put it on my dresser. It wasn't until I got up the next morning that I discovered it was lined up directly at eye level where I got out of bed. I effectively booby-trapped my room against myself. My sister-in-law is a molecular biologist. Her level of genius is astounding. She put herself through school via scholarships, but made pocket money working at Ponderosa. One day she was changing the oil in the fryer and set the old hot grease tub on the floor and proceeded to step in it. She literally cooked her own foot. It took several skin grafts, but mostly looks normal now. So whenever someone does something stupid in our family, we say they cooked their foot. Professors with all kinds of degrees who've written renowned books or papers, but can't figure out how to make a video play on the projector instead of on the monitor. My father told me a story about his father. My grandfather was a brilliant chemical engineer working for Procter & Gamble. He actually led the team that figured out how to make liquid Tide. One day he came home, scooped himself some ice cream, put chocolate chips on top, and put it in the microwave. He was surprised that the ice cream melted rather than the chocolate. I stuck my hand in a pot of boiling water. My brain just stopped working for that second, apparently. I took a sauté pan out of the oven without a mitt. We should start our own cooking show. 10 out of 10 would watch. Tonight on Scald and Burn, we need someone to play the long-suffering, ridiculously hot standby medic. You in? My friend is standing in line at Target and has a 9-volt battery and a penny in his pocket. The two make contact and naturally the penny gets hot. He pulls the 9-volt out of his pocket and looks at it as if he's never seen this object before. He sticks his tongue on it, shocks himself, pulls it away and looks at it, and then does it again. Pulls it away, looks at it, and does it a third time. The cashier just stared at him like someone let a monkey out of a zoo. A lot of smart people I know are just terrible with money. I know people with 4.0 GPAs and high-paying jobs that are borderline bankrupt because they spend every dollar they have trying to keep up with the high rollers who run their company. Like, these are smart people, but incredibly insecure as well, and that's just a terrible combination. I made peanut butter cookies last night and I forgot to put in all of the dry ingredients. So you made peanut butter soup. My best friend has a genius-level IQ. He was in the top 10 of my graduating class and has nearly a 4.0 GPA studying chemical engineering. I once saw him look right down the barrel of a loaded shotgun. I did this with a champagne bottle I was trying to open. The cork popped, bounced off my forehead, and then ricocheted off the ceiling. I had a round welt on my forehead for a day or two. I'm not a genius. I did that as a best man at my buddy's wedding. Made the toast, got the bottle. Wait, how's this thing work? Never opened champagne before. Maybe I'll put it on the table and look down to see what the problem is. Bang! Mother fricker, right above my eye. Play it cool. Maybe no one saw. No, they all did. Well, I said no wedding is complete unless blood is spilled. Just didn't think it would be mine. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, my really smart wife married me, but I'll forgive her for that one. A friend of mine used a variant of this on his wife. While shopping for curtains, he said, "Well, since I clearly have better taste than you," and she interrupted, "You do not?" "Sure I do. I married you, and you married me." According to him, she just sort of flopped her jaw like a fish for a bit. He said it's the only time he's ever won an argument with her. Guys, he's been married for 15 plus years at this point. You do not pull this card after a month or even 10. My old lady of 7 years just finished up her master's in accounting. She roasted a chicken yesterday, and as the timer rang, I yelled to her to remember to use a hot pad to take the lid off the roaster pan. Because like the pan, the lid handle is hot. I get a sarcastic, "No duh," back from her. I watch from a mirror with a good angle of her, as she takes the pan out with 2 hot pads on the side handles of the pan. She then sets the pan on top of the stove, puts the hot pads back in the drawer, then grabs the handle on the lid of the pan. She burned her hand again, dropped the pot lid to the floor loudly, and then ran to the living room to see if I was laughing. I was. Dumbest smart person I know. I love her. I feel like I could have renamed this video "Stupid Things That People with High Academic Degrees Do," and it would have been nearly just as applicable, to be honest. I was going to bake cookies for my 20th year high school reunion, but I encountered a problem. I explained this problem to my fiancé, like so. I was going to make cookies for my reunion, but it ended up that I couldn't. Why? Well, your mum gave me that box of cookie cutters that has over 100 cookie cutters, and I was going to make cookies in the 9 and 5 shape for the class of 1995. It has 1 through 8, but no 9. At this point, he just stared at me because he thought I'd come to a realization on my own, which I hadn't, by the way. I said, "What? You just have to turn the number 6 upside down and it's a 9. A long, blank stare from me. The number 6 upside down is the number 9. You did realize that, didn't you? He cracked up when he figured out that I never realized this. I have a PhD. That's okay, my mom is a programmer for Boeing and she complained that her heated blanket was still too hot. Turns out the number 7 looks like an L upside down and she thought it was on the low setting. I have a relative, cousin of my aunt, who has a doctorate in engineering and made a ton of money in petroleum engineering. Yet, over the years, she sent a large fraction of it to Nigerian scammers. Even more interestingly, he started doing this before the internet, when they just sent snail mail letters to people, and has sent it to the same Nigerian family over the decades. His way of supporting Africa, I guess? But then, this person also didn't believe we landed on the moon or that the Holocaust happened, so there's that. A girl I went to high school with went to the same university as me. She was top 5 in our graduating class and hasn't gotten lower than a 3.8 in 2 years of college, including biochemistry and organic chemistry. One summer day we were out at a bonfire and she had a hood on because, and I quote, "Don't moon rays make you paler?" My grandfather has a PhD in computer science, one of the early ones. He was on the team that developed the fingerprint computer that ended the days of using a magnifying glass to match prints. The original computer now lives at the Smithsonian. It was snowing out and he said he was grilling steaks. I thought he was on the outside porch. I looked outside and he was not there. I found him in the basement using a huge gas grill. It took several minutes to explain to him why this was not a good idea. Mine was the stupidest thing I've ever done. It was pretty embarrassing. I was leaving my flat and I was talking to a girl on my uni course. As I got to the door to exit the building, I noticed someone outside and was going to let them come inside before I left. After about 6 or 7 seconds of me just standing there, the girl asked me what was up, and I told her that the person outside must have been having trouble getting inside. She then pointed out that it was my reflection. In conclusion, I'm as stupid as a dog. I also just blasted myself full in the face with some air freshener because I thought the nozzle was pointed the other way. I am now blind. My friend turned 20 one day, and we were talking about his birthday. I proceeded to comment, "Wow, you've been a teenager for 20 years. Yeah, my friends don't let me live that one down. I told my sister, who was turning 25, that she was halfway to 30. Spent an incredible amount of time and effort nervously trying to figure out why an almost new and very expensive oscilloscope won't turn on. The reason was that someone had toggled the switch on one of the built-in power strips on the lab bench to off. We were getting ready for dinner one night and we were kind of in a rush to get it done. Whatever we were making, it required bread. Well, the only bread we had was frozen at the time, so we had to quickly defrost it. So my mother randomly yelled for my oldest brother, who happens to be the smartest out of all of us, to go get it from the freezer and bring it to the kitchen. He delivered the frozen bread to the kitchen and our mum had our hands full. So she told him, "Take the bread tie off and put it in the microwave." So he takes the tie off and puts the tie in the microwave and sets it to defrost. Not even 30 seconds later, he starts saying, Mum, the bread tie's on fire." Turns out my brother thought "it" meant the bread tie and not the frozen loaf of bread. In conclusion, smart brother put bread tie in the microwave to defrost and it caught on fire. That man did exactly what his mother told him to do and is beyond reproach. In a military court of tribunal, he would be 100% exonerated and I won't hear a bad word against him. My friend Kevin went to Caltech and works for JPL. He's an actual rocket scientist, literally one of the smartest people I can think of. When we were in our early 20s, he had to take his brand new Honda Civic back to the dealership after 2 weeks of ownership because he filled it with diesel. Afterwards, I asked him, "Isn't the diesel nozzle incompatible with the standard gas tanks?" His response was, "It's not. It wasn't easy, but I made it work." My friend is a geneticist, smart guy all around. A few months ago, he spent 10 minutes trying to push open the door in his kitchen, and eventually his hand just went through it, and he gashed his arm and ended up getting a bunch of stitches. If he had pulled the door instead, it would have opened. I travel a lot for work, and I'm going to London later this month. One of my girlfriend's best friends is an NICU nurse, saving the lives of premature babies every day, and has forgotten more about biology and anatomy than I've ever known. She asked what language they speak in London and if I was going to visit the Eiffel Tower if I got some free time. This one is about me. I'm a senior in engineering, being paid to do some fancy research that we hope will easily eradicate third world diseases. My dad has always managed my finances and never really taught me much. I just got a credit card and had a $500 limit, spent $492 in a month, and got confused when during the next calendar month, after the statement, my credit card was still being declined. I thought the limit reset every month regardless of if you paid your balance. It just made sense to me. When I called my dad asking why my credit card hadn't reset yet, he laughed at me for a solid hour and told all his business partners. I laughed it off as being an engineer and not a finance person like him, but my lack of real-world experience with economics or money is also sad. I'm a living case of why we should have useful life skills classes in high school. This girl I was kind of seeing at the time asked me if I wanted to watch a movie, so we go up to her room and she popped in Elf. She turned to me and asked, "Wait, can you watch this movie since you're Jewish?" She has a 4.0 GPA and is going to law school next year. Also, when I eventually told her I was a virgin, she asked me if I had ever had a stiffy. I was 19. Not seen directly, but I heard the professor tell these two stories. This man is an expert with nanomaterials and just an all-round physics rock star, and yet I have not one, but two stories about him. The first, the professor began watching karate movies and became a fan. Soon, he begins to wonder if he can reproduce some of the feats he's seen various martial artists perform on film. "I'm a physicist," he says. "I can do this." So he gets a stack of a few cinder blocks and tries to break them with his fist. He shattered almost every bone in his hand. The second story, once his home's water heater stopped heating water. "I'm a physicist," he says again. "I can do this." After all, he reasons, the water heater is just a really big resistor submerged in a tank of water with some plumbing attached to it all. Why not repair it himself? The basement cleanup cost him a few $1,000s plus the cost of a new water heater and professional installation. I work in a hospital with some of the most talented neurosurgeons on the West Coast. These are the folks that are flown out to Johns Hopkins, Columbia University, or India and China to give presentations to the world's best in the medical field. Many of them still type with just their index fingers. They can't spell for crap, and this is just a regular thing with doctors. One of them couldn't figure out how to open his coffee. You just pull out the stirrer that doubles as the plug to keep your coffee warm and prevent spills. He eventually just gave up and took the lid off. Weekly scheduling issues when they want to get a friend's family in next week when they're booked for 6 months out. "Sorry, doctor, you're booked out. If you wanted to have complete control over your schedule, you should have gone for more money in at a for-profit hospital. That's why your friends can do it at their hospital. This is a public hospital. No one jumps the line because they're richer or have the hookup." Almost half of them don't even know how to really use a computer for anything more than Facebook. Their assistants handle everything. These are usually the over 50 crowd, and most of the younger surgeons don't have this issue. I'm always impressed at how many doctors are incredibly unhealthy in their habits. Most of them smoke, do substances, wolf down double bacon cheeseburgers twice a day, rarely exercise, and hardly even go to their own doctor. We had one orthopedist, highly respected and very talented, park in a handicap spot because he thought that symbol applied to him because he treats all the people in the wheelchairs. I'd much prefer to think he was being a selfish prick, he's actually a nice guy, and was feigning being dumb to get a nice parking spot. We didn't push the issue, the thing is, he has his own reserved parking spot. What's the most ridiculous thing you've seen in court? So, I was the intern for a judge. Most of his cases were related to substances, DUI, or working girls. One day, a woman is brought up from jail for a hearing, substance-related. She's a regular in the courtroom and is in one of the substance dependency programs. The judge asked, "Tell me what happened."
"Well, I was leaving the Metrodome clinic and this guy asked if I wanted some fire-ass dope."
He asked, "What?"
"If I wanted some fire-ass dope."
A lawyer whispers to her. "Some fire-ass dope?" asked the judge.
"Yes, Your Honor, some fire-ass dope."
From here, it turned into something very comparable to the Super Troopers' littering and moment, while we all tried to avoid laughing. Skipping ahead, "I take it you used it and that's why you're here."
"I did, and it was damn good."
I was installing furniture and equipment in a courthouse office. I'm walking into the building with all of my tools, waiting in line to be cleared by security. The man in front of me steps up to the metal detectors and grabs one of the baskets you use to empty your pockets. Into said basket, the man places his watch, his necklace, wallet, keys, cell phone, bag of green herb, and a gat. He then casually walks through the metal detector and looks back to the officer to get his belongings. The 3 officers and several people standing around are stunned. After a few seconds, the officer with the basket says, put your hands behind your back? The guy didn't fight them, he just refused to believe he had done anything wrong. He was there for a substance-related offense. I was locked up in a county jail for probation violation. They let inmates out at midnight on their release date, and they have to check out at the window by the holding cell I was in at the time to get their belongings. So an inmate walks up to the window to acquire his street clothes and gets the okay to go into the bathroom and change into them. Naturally comes back to the window to sign his paperwork and be on his way. Nope, he digs into his pocket and a joint falls onto the ground. A deputy was called in, patted him down, and put him in handcuffs and took him away. These are the same deputies who missed my car keys in my pocket when patting me down a day prior. I could only imagine how that guy must have felt. I'm a legal secretary. I used to assist attorneys who practice juvenile dependency. We were funded by the county to defend indigent parents whose children were removed by CPS. A mother came to court with a tattoo, "Frick the CPS," on her neck. A client, the defendant's father, was on the witness stand being questioned. The attorney asked, "How much green herb do you use currently?" And the client replied, "Well, not as much as I'd like." Cue facepalm. Well, you could very loosely interpret that answer as still being none, but yeah, it's not a very helpful statement. Apparently cases involving CPS are a hotbed for strange behavior, as a few more experienced people have written in. It's never a dull moment. I had a coworker whose client declared to a judge that she didn't see an issue with her husband driving drunk with the kids, because when he was sober, his driving was terrifying, but when drunk, his driving was better than her own. To which the judge ordered her to take a UA, and last I heard, she was positive for a whole lot of substances ending in etamine. I have a friend that does volunteer work that lets her sit in on a lot of CPS-related court cases. She said the best one was when a birth mother, who got her daughter taken away due to her being a smack addict, argued that she was a better fit than the woman hoping to adopt the girl because, "I breastfed her for 18 months, and I read an article that says kids bond with their mother when they're breastfed." During my court reporting internship, I met a really nice bailiff. Sometimes attorneys have to approach the judge for a sidebar conversation that's supposed to be unheard by the jury. But because court is boring, attorneys having secret whisper arguments with a judge seems fascinating to a jury. This bailiff would distract them by playing Marvin Gaye on his phone and dancing around like a Motown backup singer. The guy loved his job and went above and beyond his duties. In a case where someone was robbed by 2 guys, the judge asked the victim if those 2 guys were in the courtroom. Before the victim could answer, those morons lifted their hands, as in, "Hey, we're here!" An undressed man taking off with a city bus getting charged for Grand Theft Auto. As GTA requires some element of intent to profit, this was transparently ridiculous and got taken off the charge. Florida man? After her 3rd DUI, my elderly and disabled neighbor was being let off with a suspended license and a hefty fine. Thinking she could do better, she attempted to negotiate, loudly and aggressively, with the judge, using her infinite wisdom of prime television law shows. She walked out with jail time. Most of my clients are mentally ill. I do mostly civil and criminal mental health related work. In my jurisdiction, an application by a civilly but involuntarily detained person for a review of their detention must be heard within 2 weeks of the application, no matter what. So I'm often in the position of managing clients who are unwell, including experiencing psychotic episodes, among other things. Direct examinations can be very interesting. My most memorable board review involved my client giving an impromptu demonstration of how they came to be arrested under the Mental Health Act. There was feces involved. Just another day at the office. Sounds like a crappy job. Sorry, I had to say it. But God bless you for providing legal representation to those who need it most. A defense attorney was tased and tackled by federal marshals after the acquittal of his client. He had been insufferable for the entire trial and threw a fit when the marshals tried to bring his client into custody. Although his client had been acquitted in that trial, he was awaiting trial for a separate crime in another state. Thus, he was supposed to be taken into custody and transferred. His attorney shouted at the judge and tried to block the marshals from accessing his client, and ended up getting tased in the process. His conduct during the trial had been outrageous. So much so that the chief judge sought to block the guy from federal practice in the state. He had pro-hocked in and pursued sanctions in his home state. I saw a woman who wanted to plead guilty and not guilty. When asked by the judge, she explained that she did turn left in front of the other car and failed to yield, but she didn't mean to hit anyone, so she was guilty and not guilty. In the matter of the state versus the woman on the plead guilty and not guilty, we the jury find the defendant no. Schrodinger's mom. I was there to contest a $250 ticket, which was issued in error when the cop ticketed everyone in one lot for parking illegally on private property. Mine was the only car actually allowed to be there. So the guy who went up before me had been ticketed for parking illegally in front of a handicap-only meter, which has a red top in DC. He had brought pictures to show that there were no signs near where he had parked to indicate that red top meters are exclusively for handicap use. He lived in Maryland, he said, and was not aware of that DC law. Since there were no signs, he argued that he couldn't have known. From what the judge was saying, it seemed like he was about to excuse the ticket, when the guy, I can only guess thinking that this would somehow help him, threw in that he was in the Maryland Police Department, and as such, he was a very upstanding citizen who would never break the law knowingly. The judge immediately ordered him to pay the full ticket amount and advised that since he was a DC cop, he should probably make sure to familiarize himself with the laws he was supposed to enforce. I wonder if anyone's ever accidentally discharged a weapon in a civilian space, and then tried to get off the charges by saying, "It's okay, I'm in the army and it was a mistake this time." Same energy. A friend of mine works for the state's crime lab, mostly working kits to prove the unspeakable act and DNA tests, and she's frequently called as an expert witness to many unspeakable acts trials in her jurisdiction. Once she said she was called to be a witness for an aggravated case, and had to explain how and where they found evidence on the victim. She starts explaining that they found traces of his DNA inside the victim and the correct term for a part of the female anatomy. And the middle-aged male judge stops her mid-sentence and goes, "Now, wait a minute, you said that word. What is that part?" And she had to explain in excruciating detail to a full court and jury what that part was, because the judge had never heard of one of those before. Yikes. I work with judges, and I'd bet he was trying to discreetly tell her to explain it to the jury. Since they have jurors from all walks of life with varying levels of education, judges, at least the ones I work with, go out of their way to kindly dumb it down for jurors who might be too embarrassed or timid to ask for an explanation, but need one to understand the witness. Self-depreciation is a good way to do that. To add to this exact same question would be the next one out of any experienced lawyer's mouth as well. Never underestimate the jury's ability to misunderstand testimony. Somebody in that box would have heard Volvo and thought the splooge was found in the girl's car. Lawyer here. Female client shows up for court to be sentenced to probation on a minor charge, green herb or shoplifting, I can't remember, wearing what looks like a one-piece, bright yellow bathing suit with flip-flops and a yellow fishnet wrap over the bathing suit. I held my breath when the case was called. The judge did the sentencing and then, "And next time, don't show up for court looking like you're going to the beach." The client, deadpan as if confused, said, "But I am going to the beach." Did he then say, "No, we said you're appearing before the bench"? Nothing too terribly crazy. There was the lady who fake fainted during a hearing when the attorneys were at a sidebar. Like she held onto the chair as she got on her knees and threw herself on the ground like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. The judge and attorneys glanced over her way and continued speaking. Then there was the time I told my client we would lose about 11 billion times, but she still insisted on going to trial. And shocker, we lost. So when I took the group around the corner to tell them the news, she started sobbing and slid down the wall all dramatic, while her new guy threatened to beat up the other party. At a restraining order hearing, some guy decided it would be a good idea to threaten to kill his wife in the hallway. My client heard about it and told me. I told the bailiff and left. Apparently the bailiff told the judge. The guy was immediately handcuffed and thrown in a holding cell, and I was called back to court about it. Apparently he didn't really mean to threaten to kill her. All that bravado went away real quick once steel cuffs hit his wrist. The first appearance in criminal court, the bailiff missed the wooden block while using the gavel, and shattered the glass covering the tabletop. We had to stop the hearings and used file folders to sweep up all of these chunks of glass before a defendant cut themselves or smuggled some glass into the jail. That bailiff was teased about breaking the glass for years. And another story I heard but didn't witness, a criminal hearing. The victim's father jumps across the barrier to attack the defendant. Bailiff jumps in and the judge can't see what's happening, so he pulls out his personal piece. All attention immediately goes toward the bench, with the judge standing there packing heat. I believe bailiffs took the judge's gat and got control over the father and defendant. Unsurprisingly, someone ran against the judge in the next election and won. Most other people just say ridiculous things rather than doing ridiculous things. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We represent what has to be a billionaire and his companies. He's like mid-80s. We had a settlement conference and the guy exclaimed to the judge that he was too fricking old and too fricking rich to put up with this bullcrap. The judge threatens to throw the partner, I'm a low-level associate, into jail. The amount of money this guy pays us, my partner isn't backing down and basically doubles up what the client said. People calm down. The partner tells every new associate that story within an hour. Said partner once also crapped his pants on the way to a hearing once after having eaten 4 protein bars for breakfast. He was also very proud of his subsequent commando court appearance. I watched a guy sitting in court fall asleep, start snoring, and then suddenly burst out this lion's roar yell. The judge calls him up and asked if he was on anything. No, Your Honor, just tired from working overnight. It was 3 p.m. His probation officer decided to do a pee in a cup test. Being the only male in the courtroom, I was elected the one to take him to the courtroom and witness him pee in a cup. He tested positive for 2 to 3 things. He was sanctioned 5 nights in jail for lying to the judge and had to restart the program from the beginning. He was pretty close to being on the last step. Another time on revocation docket, we were sitting waiting on the jail defendants to be brought up. We were filling out some continuous motions and we hear this loud hiss and exhale. The lone guy in the galley had decided to take the biggest hit off his vape, right there in court. The judge was furious and ordered him up to the bench. He started crying, stating it went off in his hand. The vape cloud was the full length of the 15-foot bench. He went to jail for contempt. We're not sure what he was there for in the first place, though. Covering a trial for a local radio station. Man was being tried for murder. The victim had faked his own death 2 years earlier and had been hiding in the woods since. So essentially killed a person already thought to be dead. Highlight of the trial was when the Commonwealth attorney asked the defendant how the victim ended up being stabbed. The defendant said, "He was drunk and fell on my knife." The attorney asked, "How drunk do you have to be to fall on a knife 17 times?" Was this the inspiration for the cell block tango in the musical Chicago? Or had the guy been listening to show tunes on the way to court and got unknowingly inspired? I was a witness for the prosecution in a case where the defense attorney was probably doing his first jury trial. He kept doing crazy TV lawyer stuff. Multiple times when he asked me a question, he yelled, "Are you aware you're under oath?" He did the same thing when my wife testified. They had to clear the courtroom at least 4 times for the judge to yell at him. The guy actually did it, but his lawyer was so incompetent he just didn't have a chance. I talked to him years later. He was getting an outside lawyer to appeal the conviction. It was a court-martial, so good luck with that. Not a lawyer. My grandma threatened, while inside the courtroom, to sue her lawyer for misrepresentation. Then she stormed out after not getting the result she wanted. She's a bit kooky. I was a juror. There was a horrible expert witness testifying for the defense on a murder trial. Everything he said was objected to and sustained. The prosecutor started to question him, and he couldn't answer a single question. He must have somehow triggered Siri on his phone, and it said, "It's okay if you don't understand." Expert witnesses have such a low bar to be considered experts, it's almost criminal. My dad is doing a bunch of expert witness and case review for the College of Physicians. He accredits hospitals around the world and he's won numerous awards. He is the top of his field. He was an expert witness against a woman suing another doctor, and that woman's expert witness was someone who had not practiced medicine in 3 years after no one in the hospital would work with the expert because they were dangerously incompetent. The expert was also working as a full-time real estate agent since leaving the hospital 3 years before the case. Back when I first started, I was in court with my father-in-law, also an attorney, and he was arguing with the judge and took issue with something the judge had said, by saying, "That sounds like something a Yale man would say." The judge asked, "How did you know I went to Yale?" "I saw your ring when you were picking your nose." Yeah, it's good to practice with a bunch of old country lawyers. Just today, I got in a heated argument in court with opposing counsel, and we both had pretty raised voices and her client started to cry. So the opposing counsel said, "No, it's okay, this is just how we argue, we still love each other," and came over and gave me a hug. The judge didn't say a word. Another time I was arguing that a guy should not get probation because he was refusing to take random substance screenings. He explained that he wasn't refusing, he just thought we were wasting our efforts because he'd just admit he smoked green herb all the time. Then there was the criminal defendant who came to court wearing a hoodie that said, "I came to F crap up," and the lady who pulled into the courthouse parking lot beside the sheriff's department in front of the K9 officer who was standing with his dog in the next parking space with a veritable pharmacopoeia in her car.
The amount of people I've seen show up to court in pajamas and other ridiculous outfits is astounding.
I had a friend who worked in family court during law school and she reported a guy showing up to a child support hearing wearing a shirt with dollar signs and money all over it, claiming he couldn't afford anything. Similarly, my client wore a fur coat to a garnishment hearing. She didn't have money, but she did have ratty old fur. I was an intern working for an attorney, family law. Annoyingly nasty divorce, leaving the courtroom, opposing party leaves first and we hold back a bit before leaving. Standard operating procedure. We go down the stairs and around the corner towards the exit and what do you know, it's the disgruntled former husband with a barrage of colourful insults and he's cranked the volume knob to about 12 out of 10. Enter me, about 6 foot, 175 pounds, clearly working for an attorney and in notably better shape than him. Confident he wouldn't try anything as there are cops everywhere, and one approaching to investigate the disturbance. I feel emboldened and step between my client and the opposing party and begin to say, "Hey, calm down now, man, now is not the time," or "Mother fricker punched me in the gut." I was not expecting that crap. I doubled over immediately. He got tackled by the nearest officer, cuffed and dragged away presumably to the jail next door. The partner is clearly trying to contain her laughter and our client is on one knee asking if I'm okay. Meanwhile, I'm dying of embarrassment and trying not to vomit up my breakfast. Heard this from a co-worker who was sometimes in the courtroom. I can't remember what the original offense was to bring the defendant to court, but the guy was really immature and a complete butthole. Wait for it. If there was a moment where the judge wasn't looking, he'd turn to his family in the gallery and smirk at them, just being a complete pain and belligerent all through the trial. Flipped off the judge at one point. The judge said something he didn't like, so he turned around, dropped trow in the middle of the trial, and spread his butt cheeks apart. The judge got a full view of this guy's butthole and ball bag. He and his family all had the audacity to gasp and heckle when contempt of court got added to the docket. I love the idea of a court going full-blown sitcom audience, boos, cheers, and laughs. Let's get it all in there and make a real-life Judge Judy courtroom. I'm a family law attorney, so I see a lot of people at their worst, but one case was absolutely disgusting. I originally started out taking some pro bono cases, where the court specifically linked attorneys up with people with disabilities who could not afford attorneys. Generally, these people were very nice, and I enjoyed working with them to get them the help they needed. But this woman, she was one complete piece of garbage. I didn't generally get much information prior to meeting with these clients, and so I went into most initial meetings blind. When I walked into the room, I was initially confused, because the woman didn't look like she applied to the program. She had the Michael Kors purse, an Apple Watch, and a Burberry trench coat. Keep in mind that one of the major factors for getting my help was intransigence. I got some information after the case that she continually used a significantly minor disability to get free legal aid to, in essence, harass her ex-husband. We began talking and she told me about how her ex was mistreating her children. I listened to her story and it actually made a lot of sense. Her son, who was nearly 18, actually left her ex's home to come live with her, and her daughter had made a 911 call, which I read the transcript of. So I looked at the file and was a little confused to see that this woman had lost all visitation rights to both her kids. This was a big deal because it almost never happens. Even substance-addled parents generally get supervised visitation. She had nothing. When I asked what happened, she told me that the judge was corrupt.
I knew the judge well, so I told her that I didn't believe that was the case. She then proceeded to regale me with information about how the judge was in a secret lesbian relationship with her ex's now wife. Once that was out, it was all she ever talked about. She had pieces written online about it, and she actively told me time after time that she could prove it. She talked about it more than she talked about her kids. Fast forward a couple of weeks before the hearing, and I get a stack of printed text messages from the opposing attorney with hundreds, if not thousands, of texts between her and the daughter she was to have absolutely no contact with by court order. The texts went from bad to worse. The daughter was 8th grade or so, and it was clear that the mum was manipulating the daughter to skip school and have secret rendezvous where the mother would buy her expensive clothing. So that was definitely a major strike against her, and was most likely enough to deny any request she was seeking. But there was so much more, including racial slurs, bigoted generalities, and constant coaching to leave her ex's care. The worst, though, was a text chain where the daughter actually called her stepmom a rug muncher, which clearly indicated her mum had been feeding her the secret lesbian relationship ideals. The daughter had said that the dad was drunk, and the mum replied something vague about how the stepmom wasn't getting any that night with her dad being drunk. The daughter asked what she meant, and the mum, to her 8th grade daughter, replied, "Broke wiener." We lost well before the hearing happened. At the hearing, the judge, different from the one the mum hated, did what every reasonable judge would do and denied the request. At which point, the mother stood up and started yelling in front of a full courtroom that everyone there was in on the lesbo bonanza. She was held in contempt and ordered to pay a fee for every day the other child wasn't returned to the father's care. She said that she didn't give a flying frick and she would just pay the fee. At this point, the judge said, "Well, if that's the case, I will annotate the file to inform court admin that you should be able to pay for your own attorney going forward." I lost the hearing, but damn did that loss feel good.
What's a bad thing everyone should experience at least once? For many men, a finger in the butt. But for good reasons. Get your prostates checked, guys. Being humiliated for being a butthole. Some people need this to happen more than once. Poverty. It will make you appreciate what you have at least a little. Everyone should experience firsthand how money can destroy close relationships and how quickly it can happen. I was dating a girl who had a lifelong friend with bad credit, like really bad. She wanted to buy a new car but couldn't get approved for a loan and asked my friend to co-sign. Then it turned out her credit was so bad she couldn't even use a co-signer. They wouldn't even issue a loan with her name anywhere on a form. So she had the idea, "Could you buy the car or get the loan and I'll just make the monthly payments until it's paid off?" I told her, "Don't do this, there's a reason why she has bad credit." Well, she didn't listen and bought the car for her friend. Her friend made exactly one payment to her, and the next month, nothing. She started ditching phone calls, and then we find out she moved out of her apartment. Suddenly, this girl's family, who my friend had known for 15 years, is pretending they don't know where she lives and has no way of getting in contact with her. A couple more weeks and an envelope with half a car payment, 3 weeks late at this point, shows up stuck under my girlfriend's doormat. The next payment comes due, and nothing. So now my girlfriend is making the payments every month on a car she hasn't seen in months. Her friend, who promised to make payments, is a payment and a half behind, and it's only been 3 months. The one thing she listened to me about was she kept a key to the car, so we had the idea we'd find the car and take it, since it was legally and morally her car anyway. So we spent I don't even know how many weeks every night driving around for hours, hitting this girl's hangout spots, friends' houses, family houses, etc., until one night we find the car parked in front of her father's condo. My girlfriend jumped in, took the car and drove it to another friend's house, who was going to put it in his garage for a while until things cooled off. We weren't 2 minutes gone before bad credit chick is blowing up her pager, yeah, it was that long ago, having suddenly remembered her number. Anyway, long story short, this was a lifelong friendship. And this chick barely even hesitated at the chance to steal a fricking car from someone who was trying to help her. I've been lucky enough that nothing like this has ever happened to me, but I have seen seemingly loving and normal families destroyed overnight in squabbles over money, namely family wills. Money can apparently ruin lifelong relationships, and we should take that into consideration when dealing with that. Minor car accident, so that you understand, even if no one is hurt, how quickly it can happen. How hard the cars jolt on collision, and how much hassle it is to get through insurance. It's happened where 2 drivers have driven into me in the past. I drove with real caution for months afterwards, and I'm extremely attentive to the road as a result. I pretty much totaled my first car when I was 17. No injuries, but it was my fault and I lost my license for 6 months. It wasn't my first offense. Fast forward 30 years and my driving record is spotless since then. While teaching my daughter to drive, I tried to impress upon her the hassle, inconvenience, and embarrassment of even a minor traffic accident, especially if it's your fault. I told her that she'd never truly understand the feeling unless it happened to her. Then a year later, it did. She was cut off by a truck on a wet road and wound up rear-ending him. She was cited for following too close, which was bullcrap, but whatever, and ended up totaling her car. She's mentioned many times since then how her attitude towards driving safety has changed. I'm afraid to say it, but I think in both of our cases, having a minor accident was just the thing we needed to understand emotional driving and avoiding dumb risks and defensive driving. It made us better drivers, although I'd hardly recommend it. I think it's important to get used or ripped off once by a supposed friend. My son, when a teen, would believe anyone. Any story, any hard luck tale. Then came the day a friend sold him fishing poles for way too much money and dropped them off. They didn't have any reels on them. My son was so hurt and teed off. I felt bad for him, but he never forgot the lesson. Be careful who you call a friend. Met this girl, talked to her on the internet for years. Never really went anywhere, but talking or writing to her became a part of my regular routine. For so long it felt like I knew her, even though in reality, of course, I actually didn't. One day she hits me up talking about how she desperately needs money and is looking to sell this gift card someone got her. I think nothing of it and say, sure. I take it home and go online to activate it, at which point I find it was obviously stolen. I go on Facebook and see that she's updated her status. Sucker. Take public transportation. I know a crap ton of people who've never taken it. I personally find it kind of soothing, except when I'm taking the bus home from work in the morning, i.e. right now. If I could drive, I'd be at home and in my bed. Coming from major cities with great public transport, this is so weird to me. I couldn't imagine getting around by car. Having a terrible roommate or flatmate, it really makes you appreciate future living situations, especially with a significant other. The moment of panic and the lingering feeling in the pit of your stomach when you're driving and narrowly avoid what could have been a disaster. Not even necessarily your fault, things like braking for a deer or a car not seeing you in their blind spot and changing lanes into you and you have to hit the horn. Something that reminds you that no matter how much time we spend driving and how easy it usually is, vehicles are freaking dangerous and you don't want to get careless. Something that reminds you why driving deserves your full attention the entire time. I was driving home from college late at night on a 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. A huge buck appeared in front of me to the left. I only saw him for literally a tenth of a second. He was in the beginnings of a jump, rearing up on his hind legs, his front hooves over the top of my hood. He jumped clear over my car. Had it not been so dark out, I probably would have seen his ball bag pass right in front of my driver's window. My heart was probably at 170 beats per minute for the next hour afterwards. I don't think I blinked. Spent the entire time scanning everything in my field of view. Longest drive of my life. Being humiliated for behaving like a jerk. Some people need this to happen more than once. Agreed. That moment of self-awareness when you realize, no, you're not being funny, or the other person isn't in the wrong, but you are being a jerk, that's humbling. You learn to be a better person from the experience. Unless someone actually is a jerk, then they just double down and assume everyone else is the jerk. When Borders was closing, they didn't allow returns. This was on numerous giant banners all over the store, so it's not like they were hiding it. There was a long line checking out, and this guy was yelling at the clerk about a $3 CD and moaning about why he couldn't return it if he didn't like it. A normal jerk, whatever. Then he goes, "This is why you people are losing your jobs. You don't know how to keep the customers happy." And several people yelled and chewed him out so badly he dropped his crap and left. Seriously, what the frick, man? I hope I actually helped with that one. This was your informative piece on why not to be a jerk, from the sister channel of Am I the Jerk? And yes, I did write a quarter page worth of stories purely for a lame gag and a plug for our sister channel. You're welcome. Working in retail and/or fast food service. Working those jobs really changes your perspective on what's an appropriate way to behave in those environments, and shows you that many people have no idea how to behave appropriately in them. Cashier and bagger here, you have no idea just how rude, lazy, inconsiderate, nasty, and just downright mean people can be until you work in a customer service job. It really makes you appreciate genuinely nice people a whole lot more and shows you just how many people aren't raised right.
I can tell stories for days about the crap I see on a daily basis. For example, one time I had a lady complain to my office manager, co-manager, and store manager, I was on a register that day, saying that my customer service was awful and that someone should have trained me better. All because she didn't have enough money to pay for her stuff, so I had to decline her. Luckily, two of them saw the whole thing and politely told the lady that she was a moron and I'd done nothing wrong. The next customer in line also saw the whole thing and told them, my managers, that I was the sweetest cashier at the store. Being sick and having someone take care of you teaches you how to take care of others when they're down and the efforts and sacrifices you make. Also, being sick away from home, i.e. no one to take care of you. Once you've lain in a bed sick as a dog all alone, you appreciate everyone who's there for you. A relationship with a superficial or pretentious person. It makes you appreciate humble people even more. My first girlfriend was so standoffish, unaffectionate, and just plain rude. We were together for a year before we stopped talking to each other. At the time, I thought that was just what a relationship was, until I met my second girlfriend, who was so incredibly charming, warm, and affectionate. I didn't consider the first relationship as a waste of a year because it made me appreciate my second one so much more. Indifference from complete strangers when you're in a time of need. It seems oddly specific, but can really be translated in many settings, from being stranded and trying to hitchhike home to begging for money for your next meal. Given some time, you realize that a lot of people are real Fs. A lot of them are simply ignoring you completely, and some will go far out of their way to help. It helps you be a better person. Agreed. I got stuck out of town once, and I missed my last bus home, and not one person I stopped would lend me their phone so I could call my mum. I was about 12 or 13 and terrified that I'd have to sleep outside and would probably end up getting stabbed or something. Even then, I remember wondering why the frick nobody would let me use their phone. I'd let a crying adolescent borrow my phone if they needed to call home. In the end, I managed to find an ancient, pea-stained payphone that still worked, and called home with the bus money I had left, but I know I was lucky in that situation. This was about 10 years ago in the Midlands, England, for those asking. I do know that people probably thought I was trying to mug them, so you don't need to tell me. Being at the mercy of someone else after you've done something to deserve getting your butt whooped. I'm not saying that everyone should experience getting bashed, but I think there are a lot of people out there with attitude problems that have never experienced the consequences of their actions. A little fear can be enough to make people think twice before behaving like buttholes to others. Again, I'm not advocating violence, but the stomach plunging into your feet because you know you done effed up by being a tool to someone that isn't taking your crap, that, I think, is a valuable lesson in how not to behave as a human being. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Failing at something, because after that, you'll grow and be able to 1. Achieve more, and 2. Use it as motivation, before 3. Knowing that failing is okay. Near-death experience. You never really appreciate the finite nature of your own life until you've breathed what you believe to be your last breath, to then have it all go black. You wake up exhilarated like nothing you've ever felt since or before, the air on your skin that you've never realized before, the feeling of air filling your lungs as you breathe, the smells and tastes are all amplified. It lasted for at least a year, and the urge to savor every little thing in life and see all the previous annoyances as petty and meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It also puts into perspective the sheer terror of death, and I believe it gave me a greater level of sympathy for those that aren't as lucky. I think everyone would be a lot less violent and warmongering if they'd felt the emptiness of death. This was one of the important tenets of Heidegger's philosophy. Basically, he was of the opinion that it's uniquely human to come to terms with your own mortality. Most of our lives are spent trying to ignore that fact, or think around it via religion. But to him, that was denying our uniquely human existence. Only through near-death experience or deep, honest introspection does one actually face that their life is finite. I never really thought about religion as a means of avoiding thinking about one's own mortality, but it definitely is for many, I suppose. For the record, it also means a great deal of other things to different people as well. Laying a beloved pet to rest. I had to say goodbye to my best friend of 15 years, my yellow Labrador, this past Monday. Worst day of my life. I don't know if I can ever have another dog, as they'll never measure up to him, and I never want to go through this again. He slept by my bedside every night, and every night I'd reach down to him and pet him before going to sleep. Now, he isn't there. Go and hug your pets, people. I have to say goodbye to my girl, tortoiseshell cat, this next weekend. She has advanced liver cancer, and it's time. She's the most amazing pet I've ever had.
I can't imagine the hole that is about to be torn through my family and that has been torn through yours. I'm sorry for your loss. Pets can be the most amazing friends.
Being broke. You appreciate what little you have and what it's like to earn hard-earned money. As someone who's been struggling to find a job for months, this really hits home. It's incredibly demoralizing, and it just makes me feel like there's something wrong with me because no one will give me a job. Especially with the older generation telling me to just hand out CVs, you'll get a job really quickly, because I did. Except they refuse to accept things have changed massively. And most places will literally tell you they don't take CVs in store, and if they're hiring, you have to apply online. For the minimum wage part-time job that 300 people have already applied for in the 2 days it's been online. It sucks. And if you have no experience, you're in even worse luck. Even the most menial, low-skilled jobs won't look at your CV twice if you don't have experience. And if you can't afford to work for free to get that experience, well then frick you, peasant. I'm in a similar situation. I'm highly educated, but I can't find a job in my field. I applied for simpler jobs and jobs that require no education, but I'm overqualified for those apparently. I'm German, and here in Germany, you basically become sort of a social outcast if you don't have a job. People judge you, they call you lazy and all that stuff. I'm collecting welfare at the moment, unfortunately, which is basically taxpayer money, and people get angry at me for that. They don't seem to understand that I need the money just to survive. Just get a job, so you don't have to live off other people's money anymore. I'm getting welfare because I can't find a job. That's the whole point of it. Also, I'm obviously not living a luxurious life. I've written more than 300 applications, but no one cares and people still call me lazy. Being broke, going hungry, and being completely alone. Being a server and waiting on a table of people that treat you like a servant. Server here. Last night, a guest at a table slapped me, but he'd already written his tip, $80, and I just took it. I've never felt that way before. He was a doctor, very wealthy, and put his arm around me in a brotherly way, but he was drunk and slapped me a few times in the face. But I need the money to pay for summer classes because in Texas, you don't get student loans for the summer courses. Heartbreak or being broken up with. It's awful, but I think an important growing experience. Shoot, I went through that with my first breakup. She was the first girl I ever loved and the only one to this day. Luckily, my buddies were there for me, but it was humbling. I was a mess, I just kept crying for days. And then I had a 3-day train trip, on which I could also barely keep it together. I know men crying isn't necessarily wrong, but it just felt so unnatural. I didn't know I could feel so bad. But it was a good learning and growing experience. In an interesting or happy twist, I ended up getting back together with the same girl 6 months later, and we've been married for 5 years now. Getting stuck somewhere far from home late at night and having to find your way back. It teaches you a lot of methods that might be useful in a bind. Watching someone die. When I watched my grandmother die, I looked at my dad holding her hand. At first I thought to myself, I'm going to do the same thing too. Then I thought, someone's going to watch me die too. It was at that moment that death no longer scared me. Death started to scare me again when I buried my father. Treasure that gap between losing your grandparents and your parents. When there's no one above you in the chain of mortality, things look a lot different. My only 2 pieces of advice are, tell your parents and grandparents and children that you love them. Regularly. I almost feel bad telling people this, because there are those that it's not true for, but I did get to say it to my dad in the last conversation we had before he died. That thought brings me some peace. Also, write a will. Dealing with an estate is a pain in the butt. Dealing with an estate without a will is a major pain in the butt that no one needs. There wasn't any fighting over assets, but just tracking everything down, paying necessary taxes, paying for the funeral and disposing of various assets was incredibly difficult while I was in the middle of mourning. Thanks for your contribution to the stories. These are wise words, and I hope it's a long time before the rest of us have to put your lessons into practice. Running through fields of wheat. So naughty. Telling someone that you have a crush on how you feel. Most of the time, they won't feel the same way. You'll feel like crap, and you will get over it, and then you realize that life goes on, and that person doesn't have as much control over you. Getting used to rejection is a powerful superpower. I did, and she did not reciprocate, but we remained friends because I was carrying a torch that would break Miss Liberty's back. I didn't realize until my wife came along some years later that this friend was only staying friends because her insecurity needed constant feeding of adoration regardless of the source. When I finally confronted her with it, she walked away and I never heard from her again. One of my major steps toward adulthood. A real-life failure. There are some people who can be supported through life without properly feeling the consequences of failure. But until you actually fail at something, you won't truly succeed either. A breakup with someone you love. I feel like it teaches you some stuff about yourself that you never really realized. But alternatively, I feel like you can learn that from losing friends or family members due to really crappy reasons. Working in hospitality and being harassed by an obnoxious customer for some minor inconvenience. You're literally asking for me to be fired, Miss Minivan. Do you realize that I'm a person with a whole life just like yours, and you want me to end up homeless because there's not enough extra ice in your drink? Your drink, which, might I add, was made by a robot and not by me. So glad I'm in a call center now. For some reason, people always specify, "Now, I'm not mad at you, you're just doing your job," before getting mad. It's so different from food service. Live on a service job or minimum wage for a year. No parents as a safety net, no rich friends you live with, no big savings account you can dig into if you really need it. Nada. None of that. Yeah, I totally know what it's like. My lawyer parents made me wash cars and teach yoga for a while to get real-world experience. No, you need to feel the real, present threat of being homeless. Nothing but a crappy job at Popeyes between you and the streets. Know what it's like to run down to the plasma center and sell your blood for gas money. Have to make up excuses to not go out with friends tonight because your paycheck got lost again. Put up with your friends' snide comments when you only eat half your 10-inch pizza and box the rest for home because you'd like to have lunch tomorrow. Know what it's like to have your employment put at risk by some snot-nosed rich teenage customer who decides your service wasn't fast enough. As someone who gets migraines, I wish more people experienced at least one so they know how bad and debilitating it can be. It's freaking selfish because deep down I know that I wouldn't actually wish that on anyone, but it's deeply frustrating when you're talking about it to someone or trying to call out from work and you get, "Oh, that's when you have a headache, right? Huh!" Or when they suggest taking some aspirin. Which, that crap is absolute misery to the nth degree and then some, and Excedrin migraine only works if you catch it in time. Otherwise, you're going to be curling into a pitiful ball of whimpering pain until your body either shuts itself down for a few hours and you have to start all over again. There's only one actual answer to this topic: the bitter taste of defeat. For men, unwanted creepy advances, catcalling, etc. First time it happened to me, I was like, what if Grossy McGrossface didn't leave me alone at the bar and then berated me for being worthless while all her gross friends laughed at me? Eye-opening. Visiting Auschwitz in Poland. It's an awful place to be surrounded by and is definitely not a positive experience whatsoever. But when you're there, you get a better understanding of what it was like to be trapped there. You can no longer hear those stupid, edgy jokes about Jews. It makes me shudder and feels painful to even think about that now, honestly. And that can only be a good thing in my opinion. It's just not funny. Learn from history and be very conscious of what leaders can do to their people. Most importantly, though, pay respects to those who suffered some of the greatest pain and depravity the world has ever seen. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.